I just try and get everyone to remember, like, the kids that are still there. When people say, oh, you flushed your dad. Yeah, I know. But there's kids there that lose all the family one day, and then they're stuck there on their own.
In America, the family of murdered journalist James Foley said they took no solace from the news.
It's just so sad that our precious resources have been, concentrated to seek revenge, if you will, or kill this man, when if a bit of them had been utilized to save our young Americans.
The teenage Mwazi here at school in North London was described as a quiet, reasonably hard-working pupil, yet he went on to become one of the world's most wanted men. From this ordinary background, radicalised, still no one is sure how, to the masked executioner in Syria. He moved to the UK from Kuwait when he was 6 and after school went to the University of Westminster. In 2009 he was deported from Tanzania and questioned by MI5. But 2 years ago he travelled to Syria and appeared on videos as Jihadi John. He was named as Mohammed Mwazi by the BBC this year. This, his real voice recorded some years ago complaining about his questioning by MI5.
I'm still suggesting that I'm an extremist. And so, and he just started, going on, trying to put words into my mouth, saying, no, you're doing this. And we're going to keep a close eye on you, Mohammed. We already have been. We're going to keep a close eye on you, threatening.
From a young schoolboy to a sadistic killer, for his victims' families, the pain doesn't end today. Lucy Manning, BBC News.
So with us here on BBC World News, still to come. We'll have much more on that breaking news out of Paris, and also World Athletics chiefs meet for talks to decide whether Russia should be banned from all international competition following allegations of state-sponsored doping.
Berliners from both east and west linked hands and danced around their liberated territory. And with nobody to stop them, it wasn't long before the first attempts were made to destroy the structure itself.
It's keeping the candidate's name always in the public eye that counts. Success or failure depends not only on public display, but on the local campaign headquarters and the heavy routine work of their women volunteers.
Yasser Arafat, who dominated the Palestinian cause for so long, has died. The Palestinian Authority has declared a state of mourning for the leader who symbolized his people's hopes for independent statehood.
In the wake of the Colombian volcano disaster, rescue teams are trying to reach thousands of survivors who managed to clamber onto rooftops and trees above the sea of mud.
After 17 years of discussion, the result was greeted with an outburst of joy. Women ministers who'd long felt only grudgingly accepted among the ranks of clergy suddenly felt welcomed.
Hello, you're watching BBC World News today with me, Tim Wilcox. Our main story, a developing story this hour in Paris. Reports of one or two shootings and quite possibly an explosion there as well. The latest reports we're getting from BSM TV is that 2 dead and 7 people have been wounded at a shooting in a restaurant in central Paris. Also reports of an explosion near a stadium, a football stadium as well, an explosion in a bar. 2 police officials confirmed the shooting but had no information about the actual casualties themselves. A BBC cameraman who is in Paris says that a gunman opened fire in a bar in the 11th arrondissement, a Cambodian restaurant. According to what he could see, 10 people on the road either dead or seriously injured. Developing story in Paris, a night of violence there. Reports of either 1 or 2 separate shooting incidents, one near the Stade de France, one in the 11th arrondissement near the Place de la République. Also reports on Twitter of an explosion as well. Very sketchy details at the moment, but according to one TV station, 2 people have been killed in the restaurant shooting and 7 people injured. A BBC cameraman, though, reporting 10 people lying on the road either dead or seriously injured. We'll get more on this as we can. Now, in other news, World Athletics chiefs are talking right now to decide whether Russia should be banned from all international competition, including perhaps next year's Olympics in Rio. The meeting, chaired by Lord Coe, follows a report this week from the world's anti-doping agency, which accused Russia of widespread state-sponsored doping, effectively sabotaging London 2012. Let's go to Richard Conway, who joins us from London. Richard, what are you hearing? It's a teleconference, isn't it? What are you hearing at the moment?
Well, Tim, we're hearing that Lord Coe could be about to step out from behind these offices in the next minute or so to tell us exactly what has been decided. The IAAF looking to whether to suspend Russia from all athletic competition or not. So we should be finding out, I believe, in the next few minutes here in central London. Lord Coe about to make that decision. And momentous, perhaps, of course, Russia wants to come back in time for the Rio Olympics if it's suspended. Lots of people are looking at it and thinking, given the evidence that independent investigators uncovered, that perhaps it should be a lengthy time on the sidelines and that they shouldn't be back for those Olympic Games. We're hearing that that decision is about to be announced, and Lord Coe himself could come out of this building where he's been holding that teleconference with IAAF members around the world to let us know exactly what has been decided.
And is this done on a simple majority, Richard?
It will be a simple majority, 26 members of that board. The Russian member has given an update, presented Russia's side during the course of that teleconference, but he then was exempted from the rest of the discussion, hasn't taken part in the vote, but it will be a simple majority. So we will know soon exactly what is going to be happening to Russia. Will they be suspended from competition? And if so, how will they be reintegrated back? Because the IAAF wants them back into the fold. They want a clean sport. Russia, for their part, saying, do not punish us, do not punish clean athletes because of what happened with those who doped. So Russia trying to mitigate the severity of any suspension that is coming from the IAAF, if indeed that is what they have decided. But as I say, we should know more within the next few minutes. Lord Coe himself possibly addressing the media to tell us what has been decided.
OK, Richard Conway with the latest. Thank you very much indeed. You're watching BBC World News Today. Just a reminder of our main breaking story in the last 40 minutes or so. Police officials in France are talking about an explosion in a bar near a Paris stadium and also a shootout in a Paris restaurant. According to a local television station, or BFM television, several dead in the restaurant shooting in the 10th arrondissement of the capital. Some reports on Twitter suggesting this is a Cambodian restaurant. BBC cameraman who's on the scene reporting that 10 people either dead or injured lying on the street outside. We've seen pictures of the restaurant window being shot through. 2 police officials have confirmed the shooting but had no information about the casualties. One official is also talking about a separate explosion near the Stade de France, which is in the north of Paris. Unclear if the events were linked. These are the reports coming in and on social media from Paris. We hope to speak to another witness in Paris in the next few minutes. One person we spoke to, Gregory Domine, a few minutes ago, talked about being near the restaurant and hearing, he said, automatic gunfire, a lot of police activity there, but in the last few minutes things had become quieter. So that developing story happening in Paris, and it comes on the day that the Pentagon announced that they were confident that they had actually killed jihadi John Mohammed Emwazi, the man behind the gruesome beheadings on the Islamic State videos, in a drone strike in Raqqa in Syria, the stronghold of Islamic State. Let's speak to our correspondent, Laura Bicker, who joins us now live from Washington. They're not 100% sure, Laura, but pretty sure. What more information has emerged in the last few hours?
Well, the Pentagon held a briefing earlier today and they said that they were reasonably certain that this strike had hit Jihadi John. They told us that they had been tracking him for some time, that have been watching his movements, and that they are confident that the car they hit killed 2 people. What they are trying to ascertain and what they're assessing right now is whether one of them was indeed Jihadi John. But their confidence has been increasing throughout the day, certainly in the early hours of this morning when the news first broke. Certainly seemed that they were telling us this could be Jihadi John, and now the language is reasonably certain. I think one of the other details that we've been getting, a US official told the BBC that 3 drones were actually involved in this attack. 2 of them were American and 1 was British. But we understand it was an American drone that hit the vehicle. We also understand, certainly from this military official, that when it comes to relationships between America and Britain, when it comes to the 2 countries working together on this attack, he described the relationship as intimate.
Would this have been done with satellite aerial communications or photography, or perhaps trailing a phone he was using? He was a computer specialist. Or would it have necessitated human intelligence on the ground as well?
I think a combination of all of those things. We understand that it has been an intelligence gathering operation over a year that has joint collaboration between America and Britain, and they've just told us intelligence capabilities and, of course, tracking. And I think when it comes to these things, they're very careful about what the language they use to tell us exactly how they are doing this. But the main thing is, and certainly what they'll be saying is, this is progress, and President Obama said that within the last few hours.
OK, Laura, thank you very much indeed. Let's go straight back to events in Paris. Reports of those shootings on 2 separate occasions, 2 separate incidents, and potentially also an explosion. Let's speak to Ben Grant, who joins us on the line. Now, I think you were at the Belle Équipe restaurant which was attacked. What happened?
There was a shooting. I think we were told it was some people in cars. They opened fire on the bar. It's a lot of people. We're being led out of the building right now by police. So apologies if I have to cut off early. There's a lot of dead people. It's pretty horrific, to be honest. It's a little bit difficult to have this conversation right now, I'm not going to lie.
No, but you are safe now. But just describe. So, were you sitting in the bar? Just which restaurant, which bar, and was it your understanding that this was a drive-by shooting?
That's what someone told me. But I was at the back of the bar, so I couldn't see anything. I just heard the gunshots. People dropped to the ground. We managed to put a table over our head to protect us, and just hold tight there until it finished. And we were sort of held up in the bar because the pile of bodies in front was too much for my wife to walk over. So we waited inside until just now we got let out. So.
How many people do you think have been killed or injured in this, from what you saw?
It looked like at least maybe 7 dead people still outside. The amount of people that were injured was huge. I mean, it was one of those Parisian bars with loads of people hanging outside having drinks, what they normally do in Paris. So it was really full bar at the time. We were just lucky to be all the way at the back, I think.
How long did this last? I mean, was it in a matter of fleeting seconds, or was it sustained?
It felt like it was going on for a while, and the thing is, you kind of just assume it's not a terrorist attack. It's the last thing you think it is. So I felt like I needed to get up and see what was going on. Obviously, I didn't, because I probably wouldn't be talking to you if I had.
How is your wife? I mean, you have not been injured at all, have you?
No, we're fine. We're completely 100% healthy. Thank God, inshallah.
Where are you now?
We've just been let out. We're opposite the bar on the other side of the road.
So you can still see what's happening, can you? What activity is going on at the bar itself?
Yeah, it's just cordoned off now, and there's obviously police and emergency services attending the scene. But
And are police now going to come and interview you now, or will you be allowed to go? I mean, you sound in shock, obviously.
We've given ID details to the police, and I don't know, to be honest. I have no idea at this moment.
And how many people were inside this bar, Ben, when it happened?
I don't know, man. Like a lot. A lot of people. It was a busy Friday night. So.
Yeah, and where you are now, I mean, have the casualties and the victims been removed by the ambulance services, or are they still lying in the street?
No, unfortunately, the people that have been killed are still on the road, on the street. Most of it, I think all the injured people have gone now.
And so are you able to see that from where you are now?
Unfortunately, yeah.
And can you just describe exactly how many bodies you can see, if you wouldn't mind?
I'd rather not, man. Sorry, I'd rather not. I'm like 6 or 7, maybe. Okay. Maybe more.
All right, okay. Well, look, Ben Grant, thank you very much for talking to us on the most shocking evening in Paris. These pictures just in from this bar, busy Friday night, as Ben Grant was saying. And from what he could ascertain, sitting at the back of the bar, it sounded like a sustained drive-by shooting through the windows, people racing to throw themselves to the floor and protect themselves with tables and chairs. But as Ben Grant was saying, from where he's standing now, he thinks there are 6 or 7 bodies still lying on the street in just outside that French restaurant in Paris, or the Cambodian restaurant in Paris. Let's just remind you of what we know so far, though, with these pictures that have just come in from the scene. Reports of 1 or possibly 2 attacks in Paris in the last few hours. The reports are speaking of bursts of gunfire in the 11th arrondissement. A BBC cameraman says he can see 10 people on the road, either dead or seriously injured. Ben Grant, who we've just been speaking to inside one of those restaurants, is speaking of maybe 6 or 7 bodies. Our cameraman doesn't know where the gunman is, but the police are on the scene. Also reports of a separate attack on a restaurant in the 10th arrondissement. The details are still imprecise, but these are the pictures coming in on what appear to have been 2 separate attacks on restaurants and bars in Paris on this busy Friday evening. Also, other unconfirmed reports of an explosion at the Stade de France in the north of the capital. People talking about explosions, several people killed. We have no confirmation of this at the moment. Police are on the scene. Television stations, though, in Paris are citing police sources talking about 2 confirmed dead and 7 injured. President Hollande is on his way to the Ministry of Justice, we understand, or the Interior Ministry, to be briefed on what appears to be another night of violence in Paris. This somewhat 10 months after the Charlie Hebdo shootings in Paris and on a Jewish supermarket in January, which left 12 people dead. Also, a shooting attack, or what seemed to be an attack, or would be suicide bomber in the south of France, also in the summer in August. We hope to get more from our Paris correspondent Lucy Williamson in the next few minutes, but just to bring you up to date with what we understand to be happening in Paris. Several shootings, multiple shootings, one at a bar which appears to have been a drive-by shooting, which, according to an eyewitness we've just been speaking to now, Ben Grant, has left 6 or 7 people dead. Also, another shooting, we understand, at a Cambodian restaurant. Both these areas, one in the 10th and one in the 11th arrondissement. television stations are talking about police confirming 2 dead, but the situation is extremely confused. Also, reports of an explosion at the Stade de France in the north of Paris as well. Police on the scene. No reports of any gunman or gunmen being apprehended, but a night of violence and bloodshed again on the streets of Paris on this November evening. The second time that Paris has been targeted. It's not clear if any of these incidents are linked, but it does appear that they are random shootings with civilians, with Friday night drinkers out on the streets of Paris being the targeted. These are the latest pictures coming in. Police on the scene. Eyewitness reports, though, ones we've been speaking to, saying that there are 6 or 7 bodies lying on the street in front of the bar after automatic weapons were fired through the windows and into the bar itself. The information is very, very unclear. The situation is very confused. A short while ago, I spoke to Gregory Demine, who heard shots while watching a football match at a friend's flat. So this is what he heard close to one of the restaurants.
I cannot confirm anything by witnessing it directly, but we were watching the game. And 1 block from us in the 11th area. So I'm not talking about the restaurant Petit Cambodge at all. I'm talking about a different area in the 11th, which is not very far from
forgive me. So this is a separate incident. Is it near a football stadium? Whereabouts are you talking about?
Not at all. Not at all. I'm not at the football stadium. I'm downtown Paris watching the game home at a friend in the 11th area. I heard on Twitter the news about the 10th area incident, but we actually heard directly gunshots, and I have to say it was automatic gunshots 1 block away from here in the 11th area. So my guess is that there would be 1 separate incident at the Cambodge and a second shooting here in the 11th. Following the feeds on Twitter in French, I read about the third event a bit further on the Boulevard Voltaire at the theater Bataclan.
Okay, so actually, Gregory, I mean, the situation is very confused at the moment, but it does sound as if we are talking about potentially 2 separate shootings.
Downtown Paris, I would say, I mean, it seems that Cambodia is confirmed. I've seen pictures. And I heard by myself long sequences of automatic gun shooting 1 block away from me, Rue de Charonne, the 11th area. Yes, this I can confirm. And I read other information, but this I cannot confirm at all, about something happening at Bataclan, Boulevard Voltaire. This needs more confirmation.
Okay, and just stay with us, will you please, because we're just getting reports in from a BBC cameraman who's in Paris saying that a gunman's opened fire in a bar on the 11th arrondissement, which is the one you seem to be talking about, Gregory, as well.
Indeed.
He says he can see 10 people on the road, either dead or seriously injured. Doesn't know where the gunman is, but the police have just arrived. Are you hearing a lot of police activity and emergency services activity at the moment? If you were able to hear what appeared to you to be automatic gunfire.
I did hear a lot of sirens a few minutes ago, and now it's quite calm. I'm at the window now. You can hear from the courtyard. It's quite silent.
How far away is the restaurant from you, do you think?
Well, I cannot confirm it's a restaurant first. I can just say that 100 meters from here was clear shooting. So I don't know if it's in a restaurant, in a street, or somewhere else. The other place I was talking about was a bar and theater called Bataclan, which is on Boulevard Voltaire, and this I don't know about it. So I'm sorry, I cannot confirm anything about any restaurants.
Oh, no, all right. Well, look, Gregory, thank you very much. But just tell me, I mean, what is the atmosphere in Paris like at the moment? There have been shootings in France, of course, in the summer, and it's coming up almost to that year's anniversary of the shootings at the Charlie Hebdo and at the Jewish supermarket.
Well, I would say we are and mentally prepared and living in this permanent fear that could happen. But as we knew terrorism could hit any time for a long time already. It's not new in France, and especially in Paris. So I would say it's something we are used to, unfortunately.
Yes, and security obviously has been tightened since the Charlie Hebdo attacks on the magazine and on that Jewish supermarket. What about the response in France today to the US Pentagon statement that Jihadi John from Islamic State had been killed? Has that been followed widely in France as well? I'm sorry, I'm not sure your question was. Jihadi John, the man behind the beheadings for Islamic State, killed in a drone strike, we understand, or they believe that he was. Has that been followed closely in France as well, given the risks and threats posed by Islamic State? Not directly, I have to say, because we know that France has a role to play there, for example, beside America. But it's a small role because our military power is not so big compared to American airstrikes. All right. But still we are concerned, but it is not a direct threat for us. Gregory Demine speaking. There's been no indication, of course, that these shootings or Islamic State is behind these shootings. All we have so far are reports of two separate shootings close to Place de la République, where some eyewitnesses are talking about bodies lying on the road, maybe 6 or 7 bodies, according to one man we spoke to, Ben Grant. Also, we have, from a BBC cameraman, reports of 10 people lying on the road, either dead or injured. It does appear that one of these shootings happened perhaps as a drive-by shooting by the Bar L'Equipe, and another one near the Bataclan theatre, but both these areas popular with drinkers on a Friday night in Paris, a busy, trendy tourist area. Also reports coming in of 2 explosions heard close to the Stade de France soccer stadium, where France and Germany have been playing an international match. That's according to Reuters reporters close to the scene. So it appears to be, well, we're not sure if any of them are linked, but obviously the suspicions would be that they are 2 separate shootings in areas close to Place de la République, and also reports of 2 explosions heard close to the Stade de France football stadium, where France and Germany are playing, or have been playing, an international match. These pictures are the latest coming in from BFM TV, showing one of the areas. It's not clear, but we've also seen still photographs of the restaurant, what appears to be the restaurant front window, raked with gunfire, semi-automatic gunfire. And one of the drinkers inside what we think is the Bar L'Equipe, Ben Grant, there with his wife, sitting at the back of the bar, heard sustained gunfire, which he said went on for several minutes. And he is now he's been taken outside that bar and is standing opposite the bar. And he said from where he was standing, there were 6 or 7 bodies still lying in the road. Police are now saying, actually, that at least 18 people have been killed in these shootings. So the latest news from Paris, the pictures coming in, but BFM TV, these are the pictures we're watching now, quoting police as saying at least 18 people have been killed in at least two shooting incidents in Paris in the last few hours, both close to the Place de la République. It's not clear who is behind these shootings. It's not clear if a gunman or gunmen have been apprehended, but also reports by Reuters news agency of two separate explosions close to the Stade de France in the north of the capital, where France and Germany have been playing an international match. But BFM TV, now quoting police, as saying 18 people, at least 18 people, have been killed in the shootings in the past hour or so in the centre of Paris. Paris, scarred by the shootings of outside the Charlie Hebdo, or inside the Charlie Hebdo offices back in January, and at a Jewish supermarket the following day, which left 12 people dead, but at least 18 people killed in another night of terror and bloodshed in Paris in the past few hours. The man I spoke to, Ben Grant, was inside the Belle Equipe restaurant when it was attacked. This is what he told me.
There was a shooting. I think we were told it was some people in cars. They opened fire on the bar. It's a lot of people. We're being led out of the building right now by police. So apologies if I have to cut off early. There's a lot of dead people. It's pretty horrific, to be honest. It's a little bit difficult to have this conversation right now, I'm not going to lie.
No, but you are safe now. But just describe. So, were you sitting in the bar? Just which restaurant, which bar, and was it your understanding that this was a drive-by shooting?
That's what someone told me. But I was at the back of the bar, so I couldn't see anything. I just heard the gunshots. People dropped to the ground. We managed to put a table over our head to protect us, and just hold tight there until it finished. And we were sort of held up in the bar because the pile of bodies in front was too much for my wife to walk over. So we waited inside until just now we got let out. So.
How many people do you think have been killed or injured in this, from what you saw?
It looked like at least maybe 7 dead people still outside. The amount of people that were injured was huge. I mean, it was one of those Parisian bars with loads of people hanging outside having drinks, what they normally do in Paris. So it was really full bar at the time. We were just lucky to be all the way at the back, I think.
How long did this last? I mean, was it in a matter of fleeting seconds, or was it sustained?
It felt like it was going on for a while, and the thing is, you kind of just assume it's not a terrorist attack. It's the last thing you think it is. So I felt like I needed to get up and see what was going on. Obviously, I didn't, because I probably wouldn't be talking to you if I had.
How is your wife? I mean, you have not been injured at all, have you?
No, we're fine. We're completely 100% healthy. Thank God, inshallah.
Where are you now?
We've just been let out. We're opposite the bar on the other side of the road.
So you can still see what's happening, can you? What activity is going on at the bar itself?
Yeah, it's just cordoned off now, and there's obviously police and emergency services attending the scene. But
and are police now going to come and interview you now, or will you be allowed to go? I mean, you sound in shock, obviously.
We've given ID details to the police, and I don't know, to be honest. I have no idea at this moment.
And how many people were inside this bar, Ben, when it happened?
I don't know, man. Like a lot. A lot of people. It was a busy Friday night. So.
Yeah, and where you are now, I mean, have the casualties and the victims been removed by the ambulance services, or are they still lying in the street?
No, unfortunately, the people that have been killed are still on the road, on the street. Most of it, I think all the injured people have gone now.
And so are you able to see that from where you are now?
Unfortunately, yeah.
And can you just describe exactly how many bodies you can see, if you wouldn't mind?
I'd rather not. Man. Sorry, I'd rather not. I mean, I'm like 6 or 7, maybe more.
Ben Grant at that bar, but police now saying at least 18 people have been killed in multiple shootings, maybe 3 shootings around the Place de la République area. Also, reports of an ongoing hostage crisis in the Bataclan concert hall in Paris as well. That hasn't been confirmed by police, but these are police sources quoted on French TV. So a night of terrible bloodshed and violence in Paris. Again, at least 18 people killed, multiple shootings and explosions in Paris on a Friday night, people out drinking in the bars and restaurants, maybe at the concert halls as well, where we understand a hostage crisis is still continuing. Police on the scene. President Hollande actually had a Stade de France international between France and Germany where 2 explosions occurred nearby, now racing to the Interior Ministry to take charge of what seems to be a major event, a major incident in Paris, a city which just under a year ago, of course, was subjected to the Charlie Hebdo massacre, the shootings there, and at a Jewish supermarket which left 12 people dead, and the killing of the gunman there. But also now, just 10 months later, at least 18 people being killed in multiple shootings. We understand that one seemed to be a drive-by shooting through the windows of the Bar L'Equipe. And we are getting more reports now of what seems to be hostage-taking at the Bataclan concert hall. Now, no indication yet of quite how many people are involved in that, but according to French TV, semi-automatic weapons used in these attacks, and at least 18 people killed. Paris in a state of fear again. These photographs being tweeted on social media showing a heavy police presence in at least 3 areas. President Hollande now making his way to the Ministry of Interior to take charge of this investigation. These pictures showing, though, the aftermath of the shootings, the rakes gunfire through the windows of that Paris bar and restaurant, the bodies of the victims still lying on the street outside, according to the eyewitnesses that we have been speaking to. Also, a BBC cameraman outside one of the locations of the shooting, reporting that there are 10 bodies, either of those dead or injured or severely injured, still on the road outside. So another night of terror, no indication of who is behind these attacks, no confirmation that these attacks are linked, but it would obviously seem to be the case that this is some sort of coordinated terrorist attack targeting Paris once again. If you are just joining us, shootings in Paris in 2 or 3 locations, a hostage situation underway. Also, we understand, on the Bataclan concert hall in the centre of Paris, at least 18 people killed. We are still trying to get more from our Paris correspondent about this incident. No indication of who is behind it, but what appears to be, unfortunately, to be the case is that once again, Paris at the centre of a major attack which has left at least 18 people dead on shooting incidents on either 2 or 3 bars, packed with Friday night drinkers in the centre of Paris, near the Place de la République. 2 explosions reported by Reuters correspondents also close to the Stade de France. French President François Hollande and his Minister of the Interior have left the stadium where they were watching that match to take charge of what is a developing situation still in Paris this evening. A hostage crisis, we understand, or hostage-taking drama still underway at the Bataclan concert hall. These, the latest pictures that have come in. France 24, actually, as you can see on the screen now, reporting that 60 hostages being held at the Bataclan concert hall, a popular concert hall in the centre of Paris. Paris on this November Friday evening, packed with drinkers and people attending the restaurants and indeed theatre and concerts. This area very popular with tourists, but now we are hearing 60 people being held in a hostage situation at that theatre. Police now talking of multiple acts of violence, with at least 18 people killed in these attacks. We're trying to get more from our correspondents in the area. We have been talking, though, to 2 eyewitnesses. Well, one who was in the Bar L'Equipe, who is still there, outside, having been taken out by the police, but talking of bodies lined up on the street in front of him. He, though, and his wife, unhurt. Another person we managed to speak to could hear the automatic gunfire from one of the restaurants, who said that police sirens had been racing to the scene of that particular shooting. It does appear that at least 2 restaurants in Paris have been affected, and at least 2 explosions heard near the Stade de France stadium, where an internationals was being held between France and Germany. The French President Hollande, who was at that game, now meeting with top security officials in the Interior Ministry. Hostage-taking in the capital at the popular Bataclan concert hall. Paris once again subjected to hours of terror that, according to police quoted on French television, have left at least 18 people dead. AP now, in fact, have just reported that at least 26 people have been killed, according to their police sources. A night of absolute carnage in Paris. The numbers of dead rising by the hour. AP now reporting at least 26 people killed in shootings in restaurants around the Place de la République area, and also reports coming in of at least 60 hostages being held by gunmen at the Bataclan concert hall, again in that area. President Hollande holding urgent talks with his intelligence and security officials, having left the Stade de France, where he was watching that international between France and Germany. But a night of terror again on the streets of Paris, a night of high drama, of bloodshed, reports of at least 26 people killed and 60 held in hostage-taking. Let's go to Jane O'Brien now, who joins us from Washington.
Welcome back. I'm Jane O'Brien in Washington, D.C., and we have an unfolding situation in Paris, as you've just been hearing. So let's recap on the breaking news this hour. French police say at least 18 people, possibly 26, have been killed in a series of attacks in...
To the Interior Ministry to keep abreast of developments. This is a breaking story with reports coming in thick and fast. We'll bring you the latest. Also on the programme, Jihadi John, the British Islamic State militant notorious for beheading Western hostages, is believed to have been killed.
He posed an ongoing and serious threat to innocent civilians, not only in Syria, but around the world, and in the United Kingdom too.
Russia has been suspended from track and field athletics by athletics governing body. The stepbrother of Becky Watts is given 33 years in prison for her murder. The judge in the case is moved to tears.
Shri Narendra Modi!
60,000 people turn out to see India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi at Wembley.
And in sport, a much improved England level the one-day series at 1-1 with Pakistan as they win by 95 runs in Abu Dhabi.
Good evening. Reports are coming in of a number of attacks in Paris. 2 explosions at the National Stadium, a shooting in a restaurant, and possibly another shooting in a concert hall. We're hearing several people have been killed and hostages have been taken. The incidents were in the Stade de France area of the city, where a friendly match was taking place between France and Germany, and the 10th arrondissement. Well, let's get the latest from our Paris correspondent, Lucy Williamson. Lucy, a terrible situation appears to be unfolding in Paris. What more can you tell us?
That's right, and it is still very much an ongoing situation. The attackers have not yet been caught, and as you mentioned there in the introduction, we're getting reports of a hostage situation at one of the locations where the attacks happened. What we know so far is that a gunman or gunmen shot at customers at an Asian restaurant in the 10th arrondissement. Some witnesses are talking about a semi-automatic weapon being used. A BBC contact said he saw several people lying on the ground outside that restaurant when he arrived. Next, reports came in from a concert hall in the neighbouring 11th district of Paris, up in the northeast again. And again, we believe there may have been some casualties there. And quite separately, a series of explosions, perhaps grenades, according to local reporters, at the National Stadium, where you mentioned the president was watching a match. And police are saying they think at least one person may have been killed there. But at the moment, police are saying very little about the motives, the possible motives, the lines of inquiry for these attacks. It's very much an ongoing situation, but obviously this brings back very, very painful memories for Paris of the terrorist attacks on Charlie Hebdo just 10 months ago.
And of course that is exactly what people are going to be thinking of tonight, Lucy. But so far no one has claimed responsibility, and there's no suggestion yet that these events are linked.
There's no confirmation that these events are linked, but clearly they took place in an apparently coordinated fashion. So that's definitely going to be something that the police and the authorities are looking at tonight. And in fact, the President, the Interior Minister are meeting just now to try and develop some kind of strategy to protect the capital and then to find out exactly what caused these attacks and how they managed to slip through the net.
Well, Lucy, we will be back with you later in the programme as developments come in. Thank you very much for the moment.
Talking about was a bar and theatre called Bataclan, which is on Boulevard Voltaire, and this I don't know about it. So I'm sorry, I cannot confirm anything about any restaurants.
Oh, no, all right. Well, look, Gregory, thank you very much. But just tell me, I mean, what is the atmosphere in Paris like at the moment? There have been shootings in France, of course, in the summer, and it's coming up almost to that year's anniversary of the shootings at the Charlie Hebdo and at the Jewish supermarket.
Well, I would say we are and mentally prepared and living in this permanent fear that could happen. But as we knew terrorism could hit any time for a long time already. It's not new in France, and especially in Paris. So I would say it's something we are used to, unfortunately.
Yes, and security obviously has been tightened since the Charlie Hebdo attacks on the magazine and on that Jewish supermarket. What about the response in France today to the US Pentagon statement that Jihadi John from Islamic State had been killed? Has that been followed widely in France as well?
I'm sorry, I'm not sure your question was clear enough.
Jihadi John, the man behind the beheadings for Islamic State, killed in a drone strike, we understand, or they believe that he was. Has that been followed closely in France as well, given the risks and threats posed by Islamic State?
Not directly, I have to say, because we know that France has a role to play there, for example, beside America. But it's a small role because our military power is not so big compared to American airstrikes.
All right.
But still we are concerned, but it is not a direct threat for us.
Well, we can now go live to Lucy Williamson, who is there in Paris. Lucy, it's incredibly confusing. Reports of 2 shootings, a possible explosion, and now an ongoing hostage crisis. What can you tell us?
Well, what we know so far, the bare bones of it are what you just explained, that late tonight reports came in that a gunman had shot at customers in an Asian restaurant in the northeast of the capital, in the 10th district of Paris, and that several people appear to have been killed in that attack. Some witnesses say a semi-automatic weapon might have been used. Shortly after that, another report came in of a shooting at a concert hall in the neighbouring district of Paris, the 11th district, and separately reports of explosions outside the National Stadium in a different part of the city, where the president was actually in the process of watching a match between the French national team and Germany. And at the moment, police are trying to catch the attackers, who don't seem to have been caught at the moment, any of them, and also handle a hostage crisis, which, as you say, is unfolding at one of those locations.
So what exactly is happening as far as the hostages are concerned? Do we know how many people have been taken?
We have very few details of that at all at the moment. It's a very fluid situation here. This is news that has come to us within the last hour. And so police are really at the moment, I think, scrambling to lock down the area, evacuate the restaurants and bars nearby, and to try and get a control of the situation. We don't yet know how many hostages are involved.
What are the police actually able to tell you? Have there been any confirmation of deaths?
The police are not giving away much at the moment, as you might imagine. The police have said their latest reports are that 11 people have been killed in the attacks in the 10th and 11th districts. So that's not including the explosions at the National Stadium. But there have been other reports that suggest they may be higher. As I say, I think at this stage we are very much in the process of just gathering information from this very confused picture, very complicated series of attacks, as well as handling this ongoing hostage crisis. So I think it may be some time before the full facts become clear.
Now, as we know, President Hollande was actually at the stadium watching a game there. He is now left there, presumably to take charge of this unfolding crisis. Where is he going and what will he be doing?
He's at the Interior Ministry right now, talking to the Interior Minister. There is a crisis meeting going on there. The government obviously is going to be very concerned to get a handle on this as soon as possible. It's clearly a massive security risk, but it's also deeply troubling for Paris, bringing back very painful memories of the terrorist attacks on Charlie Hebdo 10 months ago, attacks which happened actually quite close by to where these attacks took place tonight.
So how tight was security, given the fact that those attacks at the Charlie Hebdo offices did take place less than a year ago, causing great fear and terror in Paris? What security measures were taken to try and prevent this sort of thing happening again?
Well, there were a whole series of security measures that happened in the wake of Charlie Hebdo. Policing was stepped up in many different kinds of ways, and buildings that were believed to be particular targets were given special attention and specially boosted security. I think the problem is that it's just very difficult to protect every single location, and clearly the targets that were chosen in this case may not have been targets that were seen to have been particularly at risk. If you take the example of the Cambodian restaurant, it seems to have been a fairly normal commercial establishment, much like hundreds or thousands of others in the capital, not somewhere that would have warranted special attention. And I think that's something that the government's going to be grappling with going forward, is just how to protect those kinds of soft targets.
Has security been made more problematic by the number of refugees coming in because of the migrant crisis?
I think those two issues are very much separate for now. I think this is much more a case of France's foreign policy in the Middle East. It's been targeted and been singled out by groups like the so-called Islamic State for its airstrikes over Iraq and Syria. Recently, France announced it was moving an aircraft carrier to help with those airstrikes over Syria. So I think it has been a target for those radical Islamist groups in the Middle East for some time now.
And of course, today we had the news that a drone strike, probably killed Jihadi John, the terrorist who was notorious for beheading hostages. The US is claiming that as a victory, but is it at all possible that this might have something to do with what's happening in Paris now?
It's far too early, I think, for anybody with any kind of authority to confirm what the possible motives might be there. The police certainly aren't telling us that at this stage. And of course, we should say that we don't have any idea at the moment who is behind these attacks. There's been no claim of responsibility, and there's been no particular line of inquiry that's being confirmed to us by the police at this stage. I think given the history of attacks here in Paris, it's obviously going to be one element, one line of inquiry that the authorities will be considering. But as far as Jihadi John goes, I think he was probably more had a great deal more focus perhaps back in the UK than here in France, whereas I say there's been a much more focus perhaps on the actions that France has been carrying out in the Middle East and the concerns that France has had over people coming back from those conflicts to France and perhaps causing problems for the security forces here. As I say, we don't have any confirmation at the moment of the motive behind these attacks, but these are the kinds of things I think that investigators will be thinking about.
Yes, Lucy, as you say, a lot of speculation at the moment, but thank you very much indeed for joining us and for giving us what you know so far. Well, let's bring you up to date with what we know so far. According to AP News Agency, at least 26 people have been killed in shootings and explosions around Paris. It's the deadliest violence in France in decades. Well, one police official said at least 11 people were killed in a Paris restaurant in the 10th arrondissement and about 15 killed in the Bataclan theatre, where a hostage-taking situation is underway. It's thought around 60 people are inside the theatre. Well, I'm hoping that we can go to a phone interview now. We have Igor, who was an eyewitness. Igor, I'm not quite sure where you are. Can you tell me where exactly in Paris you are right now?
Well, I checked my phone location, and I'm in a location which is equidistant between Bataclan and République, which is basically where two separate shootings took place.
Yes, but it's very confused at the moment. Which shooting were you near?
Well, I was equidistant from both, and I saw people running from République towards Bataclan, which is when I exited the restaurant I was in. But then there were also people running from Bataclan towards République, and so we were caught in the middle.
So what is the mood there right now? I mean, it must be quite shocking, very frightening, I would think.
Obviously, it's everyone's been caught by surprise. We were all there's a lot of restaurants in this area, and people were all checking their phones. I just saw the news on Twitter that there had been a massive shooting 20 meters from where I was. So we basically all tried to take shelter, and now all the people from our restaurant have taken shelter in our building.
Now, when you say taking shelter, are you actually able to move around, or have the police locked down the area?
No. We're in the backyard of a building, so we're not in the street. The police has blocked the whole area.
Are they giving you any information as to how long the situation is likely to last?
No, not at all. They just told us to run. They basically gave us 4 different directions towards which to run. So they basically didn't really know where the danger was. And so I decided not to run in any direction and just find a building where I could hide for a bit.
And who are you with? Are you with friends or strangers?
No, I'm on my own. I'm on my own. I was completely by chance here. I wasn't supposed to be here tonight, and so I'm on my own. And now both of my parents are calling me extremely worried.
I can imagine. What are you going to be able to tell them? Because presumably you're stuck there for a while.
Well, back in January, I wrote an article because I'm a freelance journalist saying that things can only get worse in France, and unfortunately it's materializing right now. I'm not sure what the motives were, but it clearly seems like there's been a massive shooting, so it's, everyone's on their toes.
Well, indeed. I mean, this comes 10 months after the massacre at the Charlie Hebdo magazine offices. Was Paris bracing itself for something like this, or were people thinking that the threat was past?
I must say, since January, I haven't seen an awful lot of police reinforcements around the city. In the very wake of the shootings, Charlie Hebdo, there was a massive police force. But in the past few months, I haven't really noticed much difference. It sort of died down, and right now, I think now people need to understand that Paris has become a very dangerous city.
But what do you think is causing that? Of course, there is a lot of speculation that it is in some way connected with France's participation in the conflict in Syria right now. Is that something that people are talking about?
Of course. I mean, the perception of the French foreign policy abroad is the main reason why we're seeing shootings here, especially with France's history in North Africa. And so I guess that's why they're taken France as a target. And here, I mean, unfortunately, people are not really aware of the risks. And I mean, it could have been me, so I can't really give any lessons, but people are really living still quite freely, but I think that's going to change now.
Well, Igor, I hope you managed to stay safe there, and thank you very much indeed for joining us.
Thank you. Bye.
Well, I'm joined now by James Woolsey, who is the former Director of Central Intelligence, and now a Chancellor at the Institute for World Politics. You've been listening to what's happening in Paris right now. Obviously, there's a lot of speculation. We have no confirmation about who may be responsible, and nobody has claimed responsibility. But what do you make of the situation right now, the possibly 3 separate attacks and now a hostage crisis?
Well, I think generally speaking, the fact that France has been a good ally of the U.S. and Britain in this struggle with ISIS to try to hold things down has worked in a sense to France's detriment, because it's a lot easier to get to France from Syria and so forth than it is to get to the United States or even Britain. And I think that there's a very good chance that a flow of the refugees, war refugees, whatever you want to characterize them as, out of the Middle East and especially out of Syria, has created the background which makes something like what we're seeing here possible. I think it's unlikely that these developments, the killing by a drone strike apparently of Jihadi John, the ISIS executioner, and these events, I think it's most unlikely they're unrelated. But what is interesting to me is the multi-point operation here, the hostage taking in one place, gunfights in others, executions. This is put together not by just a group of crazy emotional terrorists, but by something looking a bit like part of a government that plans things carefully.
So what terrorist organization right now has the capability of staging something this organized?
I would think it would probably be ISIS, and it wants to be a government. It calls itself a caliphate. It's trying to recapitulate the early days of Islam and form a state. So I would also say, although this is more likely ISIS, that the Iranian-sponsored groups such as Hezbollah and the like are quite capable and well-funded, and they could conceivably do something like this. But I don't think that's where the political pressures run. I think this is probably not Shiite like Iran, but Sunni, and ISIS likely we'll just have to see. This could all be wrong because it's very early.
As I said, we have absolutely no confirmation as to who this might be, and there's a lot of speculation and rumour, obviously, going on at the moment. We are now getting word that as many as 100 hostages may have been taken. What will the intelligence community right now be doing, trying to work out who is responsible and trying to perhaps negotiate?
Well, American Army spokesman yesterday said that the drone strike operations that have been carried out by the United States and Britain had killed senior or middle-level management, at least, I believe, one a senior person in ISIS or related organizations every other day since last May. So that's over 100. I think that we're at war. There's a saying by Leon Trotsky that you may not want war, but war may want you. And the West and its values are fundamentally under attack from ISIS and related organizations. And none of us in the West really wants that, but we may not get to choose. We may have to fight this war and fight it a lot more thoroughly than anybody's doing now.
Well, James Woolsey, thank you very much for that. And obviously events are still unfolding. So let's have a quick update on the situation at the Paris Theatre. Now, according to the Associated Press news agency, a police official is saying around 100 hostages have been taken at the Bataclan Theatre. 35 are dead. Another report from BFM TV says at least 40 may be dead. US security officials are quoted saying the series of attacks were likely coordinated. Well, details are coming in every minute, and we will update you as soon as they come in. Now, we have French journalist Agnès Poirier, who is on the line for us now. She's watching these events unfold from London. Agnès, can you tell me what you make of this?
Well, I was in Paris earlier today, I was an hour before it all started. I was actually asking a friend when the next blow would strike. Well, this is worse than at the beginning of the year. This is much more coordinated. It is obviously a coordinated attack. We'll know the nature, the precise nature of that terrorist actions later, tonight or in the next few days. The situation is extremely fluid. I've just been told that the fourth shooting near Place de la République at the moment. There are apparently 5 killers. They are on the run, and of course there's this hostage situation in a very well-known place in Paris, the Bataclan Theatre. For the moment it's a state of shock, probably until the nightmare ends and we count the deaths and assess the situation.
As you say, the nightmare is continuing right now, and we are getting very confused picture of what's actually happening. François Hollande is now with his interior minister and doing what he can to take charge of the situation. What will he be doing? What sort of things will he be looking at right now?
Well, as you know, Paris and France at large has been on the highest level of alert since January and the attacks on the 7th, 8th and 9th of January this year. And there are French army forces everywhere in the streets of France and in the streets of Paris, guarding some very sensitive places and personalities, and you wonder how much more the French government can do. We know that the whole all the people from the special units of the French armed forces are on the case. They've all been summoned back to Paris, this is about trying to protect Parisians. This is a Friday night. You can imagine what's at stake, and also trying to catch the killers, because it's obviously been thought out and coordinated. We're talking about two suicide bombers outside the Stadium of France. This needs to be confirmed, obviously, but this would actually take terror to a new level in the streets of Paris.
Well, we understand that President Obama is being briefed on the situation, and obviously speculation swirling as to who may be responsible for this coordinated attack. It does now seem that the attack was coordinated. French foreign policy obviously coming under scrutiny, particularly France's involvement in the conflict in Syria. What sort of things are people saying about that? What is the attitude towards France's involvement in that conflict?
Well, France, the French think that President Hollande is quite right in doing what it does, quite active in the coalition against Daesh. In Mali, France, intervened there a few years ago and still has forces there against Islamic militants, and France has been very active against radical Islam, for instance, and is a prime, a target for such terrorists. We'll know, of course, for the moment we don't know who carried out those attacks, so we'll talk about that when we know.
You mentioned, of course, that only 10 months ago, Charlie Hebdo offices, the magazine, the satirical magazine, were targeted, and that, at that point, was France's worst terror attack. How tight was security since then?
Well, as I told you, since the Charlie Hebdo attacks and the attack on the kosher supermarket, you can see in the streets of Paris, you only have to walk to see French armed forces doing a job that they weren't doing before, that they are not supposed to be doing, in many ways, guarding some personalities 24 hours a day, but also some very sensitive places, Jewish schools, for instance. A lot of attacks have been thwarted since January, and, for instance, an attack against a Catholic church. There are lots of armed forces guarding the Cathedral of Notre Dame. I mean, a lot of tourists would know that. So, the question today is, what more can the French government do?
Well, Agnes, thank you very much indeed for joining us from London. And we can give you another update on the situation at the Paris Theatre. According to the Associated Press news agency, a police official is saying around 100 hostages have been taken at the Bataclan Theatre. 35 are dead, while another report from BFM TV says at least 40 are dead. US security officials are quoted as saying the series of attacks were likely coordinated. Well, details are coming in every minute, of course, and we will update you as soon as they do. Well, I'm fortunate to have James Woolsey, former director of the Central Intelligence Agency, with me in the studio. I'd like to ask you about some other news that happened today, and that, of course, was the killing, we assume, of Jihadi John, the terrorist who was most notorious for beheading hostages, including 3 Americans. How likely is that death, if confirmed, to disrupt Islamic State?
I think very little disruption. They can always find an executioner. Probably they can find executioners that enjoy their work in killing Westerners. But it is a good idea to let them know that they can't get away. And the large number of killings of senior officers, in a sense, in ISIS, in Islamic State, and since last May, 100 or so, mainly by drones. At least lets them know that they're at risk. I think it's certainly worth doing, but it's far from something that's going to change the the fundamental structure of what we have to deal with in ISIS.
Well, Mr. Woolsey, thank you very much indeed for joining me. And situation unfolding in Paris right now. We have reports of multiple shootings and at least 100 hostages taken at the Bataclan theatre. And I can now hand you over to my colleague Martine Croxall on the news channel.
You're watching BBC News. I'm Martine Croxall. These are the pictures that have come into us from Paris, where this developing situation is still one of considerable confusion. Let's recap on what we know. Dozens of people are reported to have been killed in a number of violent attacks across the French capital this evening. Gunmen opened fire at a restaurant and also at the Bataclan concert hall, where there are reports that scores of hostages are being held. Explosions were also heard near to the National Stadium, where a football match was taking place between France and Germany. Well, the shootings at the restaurant happened in Paris's 10th arrondissement. These are some of the images that have been coming into us as we try to make sense of this very confused picture of a number of violent attacks that have happened in the last couple of hours. Well, my colleague Tim Wilcox spoke a little earlier to Ben Grant, who was at the Belle Équipe restaurant in Paris when it was attacked earlier this evening.
There was a shooting. I think we were told it was some people in cars. They opened fire on the bar. It's a lot of people. We're being led out of the building right now by police. So. Apologies if I have to cut off early. There's a lot of dead people. It's pretty horrific, to be honest. It's a little bit difficult to have this conversation right now, I'm not going to lie.
No, but you are safe now. But just describe. So, were you sitting in the bar? Just which restaurant, which bar, and was it your understanding that this was a drive-by shooting?
That's what someone told me, but I was at the back of the bar, so I couldn't see anything. I just heard the gunshots. People dropped to the ground. We managed to put a table over our head to protect us, and just hold tight there until it finished. And we were sort of held up in the bar because the pile of bodies in front was too much for my wife to walk over. So we waited inside until just now. We got let out. So.
How many people do you think have been killed or injured in this, from what you saw?
It looked like at least maybe 7. There's people still outside. The amount of people that were injured was huge. I mean, it was one of those Parisian bars with loads of people hanging outside having drinks, what they normally do in Paris. So it was really full bar at the time. We were just lucky to be all the way at the back, I think.
How long did this last? I mean, was it in a matter of fleeting seconds, or was it sustained?
I felt like it was going on for a while, and the thing is, you kind of just assume it's not a terrorist attack. It's the last thing you think it is. So I felt like I needed to get up and see what was going on. Obviously, I didn't, because I probably wouldn't be talking to you if I had.
How is your wife? I mean, you have not been injured at all, have you?
No, we're fine. We're completely 100% healthy. Thank God, inshallah.
Where are you now?
We've just been let out. We're opposite the bar on the other side of the road.
So you can still see what's happening, can you? What activity is going on at the bar itself?
It's just cordoned off now, and there's obviously police and emergency services attending the scene. So.
And are police going to come and interview you now, or will you be allowed to go? I mean, you sound in shock, obviously.
We've given ID details to the police, and I don't know, to be honest. I have no idea at this moment.
And how many people were inside this bar, Ben, when it happened?
I don't know, man. Like a lot. A lot. a lot of people. It was a busy Friday night. So.
Yeah, and where you are now, I mean, have the casualties and the victims been removed by the ambulance services, or are they still lying in the street?
No, unfortunately, the people that have been killed are still on the road, on the street. Most of the I think all the injured people have gone now.
And so are you able to see that from where you are now?
Unfortunately, yeah.
And can you just describe exactly how many bodies you can see, if you wouldn't mind?
I'd rather not. Man. Sorry, I'd rather not. I'm like 6 or 7, maybe more.
Ben Grant speaking to my colleague Tim Wilcox a little earlier, and Ben had been in the Better Keep restaurant in Paris when the attack happened a couple of hours ago. These are the live pictures that we're getting from the 10th arrondissement. This is just northeast of the very centre of Paris. This is where one of the shootings happened at a Cambodian restaurant. There are a number of who are said to have died. Latest reports suggest it's around 11. Of course, we're waiting for police to confirm all of the casualty figures. The numbers are rising according to which of the news agencies you read. The semi-automatic weapon was said to have been used by some eyewitnesses. This is just one of the scenes, though, where these acts of violence have happened in the French capital this evening. Other reports are of 2 explosions in a bar near the Stade de France, which is in the Saint-Denis part of France, just north of the very heart of the capital. This is where France and Germany were playing a friendly, and the French President François Hollande was in attendance for that football match. He subsequently, of course, has been holding talks with the Interior Minister Bernard Cazeneuve, and all sorts of messages of support coming in from their counterparts across the world, notably President Obama and the British Prime Minister David Cameron. This is giving you a little bit of an idea of where these events have happened. First of all, looking at the very south of that map, the Bataclan concert hall. That's where a heavy metal concert was taking place. This is the 11th arrondissement, or the district. Shootings occurred. Multiple gunmen said to have entered the building, and a number of people said to have died. And then we have had reports of police dealing with a hostage situation where dozens, potentially up to 100 people taken hostage. But I've just been reading on social media that one of the BBC's radio stations has been hearing from a French journalist who said that people have managed to escape from the Bataclan concert hall. Well, on the line now is France 24 journalist Donala de Souza, who's at a bar nearby. Donala, first of all, tell us exactly where you are, because we need to work out the geography of this.
Well, I'm in a bar in the 10th arrondissement of Paris, which is close to where the shooting happened at the Cambodian restaurant. So that's about a 15-minute walk away from where I am. And I entered the bar where I am at around 10 p.m. local time. And immediately as I entered, friends who I was with heard of a shooting that happened in the 10th arrondissement. So it was pretty sudden the minute I walked into this place. Immediately, maybe about half an hour after, we realized that it was not just one isolated incident, that there were explosions at the Stade de France, and gunman was on the loose, driving around in a black vehicle, was what we were told from the French police through social media. And then we tried to leave the bar, and then the bar implemented a shutdown. So no one's been allowed to leave where we are. And obviously a lot of people in the bar tonight, Friday night. We have around a little over 100 people here. There's a band performing, and people are worried, and they want to go outside and make calls and tell people that they're okay and safe, but they're not allowed to do that.
Delon, first of all, just let's backtrack a little bit. How many attackers do the police believe were involved in this attack on the Petit Cambodge restaurant in the 10th arrondissement where you are?
Well, it's if you look at the pictures posted on social media, it looks like the attacks happened from outside. So I don't want to speculate right now because it's too early to say if this was a drive-by shooting, because there's also reports of gunmen or possibly more than one gunman driving around in a black vehicle shooting at people. So I'm not sure right now we don't know if anything is linked or if anything's linked to what's happening in the Stade de France or what's happening in the 10th arrondissement or the 11th arrondissement, because now, before I got on this call with you, I found out that it had actually spread to the 1st arrondissement, the area of Les Halles in Paris.
Yes, we're also hearing that from our Europe editor. Katia Adler has posted something on Twitter suggesting that just that, some kind of attack, has happened at Les Halles, which is much closer to the centre of Paris.
If that Paris is a circle basically. So the arrondissement, the 1st arrondissement, the 10th arrondissement, the 11th are very, very close to each other, and these are all areas that are very crowded on a weekend night. Les Halles is the main train hub, if you will, of Paris, because you have a lot of long distance trains, the RERs as they're called, which come to Châtelet, which is where Les Halles is. So that's the main transport hub. So it's a very crowded part of Paris late at night.
Yes, as you say, on a Friday we would expect it to be. What are you hearing in terms of the casualty numbers where you are? Because we're getting a very mixed picture depending on the news agencies that we turn to.
That's right. It's a very mixed picture. I actually try to use my press card and walk out of the bar I am at, and just to find police and get a clearer picture, but I was not allowed to. It's from what I'm hearing, it's exactly the same as you. It depends on which agency you're looking at. But all I could say is, from what I'm hearing, I have a friend who's covering the hostage situation at the Bataclan, the concert hall, where a heavy metal band was performing tonight, and what we're hearing is between 60 to 100 people are in that concert hall.
Delana, we appreciate you talking to us, and thank you for the update from where you are. Delana de Souza from France 24. The Prime Minister of Britain, David Cameron, has made this statement on social media. I'm shocked by events in Paris tonight. Our thoughts and prayers are with the French people. We will do whatever we can to help. Messages of support also from Barack Obama, President of the United States, who is due to make a statement on television in the US very shortly. Joining us now on the line is Charlie Pitt. He's a freelance cameraman who was about only 30 metres from a bar where people were shot. I believe, Charlie, that you're in the 11th arrondissement. Is that correct?
Yes, I'm in the 11th, about 75 metres from the Belle Equipe Cafe that was hit about 9:10. I'd just been to the supermarket, just walked past the front of the cafe. It's a popular, typical French cafe. People were sitting outside, and I'd literally got about 30 metres when I thought it was a firecracker to start off with, and then it went on, it got louder, and it went on for about a minute. Everybody sort of dived for cover thinking it was gunfire, and it went on for about a minute. Then there was a pause for about 15 seconds, and then it all started up again. We all sort of left, and then it sort of calmed down a bit. So I walked back to the front of the cafe, and there was a whole pile of bodies, probably about 7 on the left-hand side, and about 4 that had been sitting at the tables outside on the right-hand side, and a lot of injured. I saw a woman who'd obviously been shot in the leg, and then the police turned up, and now we're sort of shoved about 75 metres away. A lot of fire brigade, a lot of police, a lot of army patrolling the streets, keeping everybody away.
Charlie, we're trying to get a sense of the geography of this, because obviously the different districts, the arrondissement in Paris, they sort of circle out, don't they, like a spiral from the very centre. We were just talking to a journalist who was in the 10th arrondissement, not far from you, where an attack happened on an Asian Cambodian restaurant. You're at this bar in the 11th arrondissement, but there's also, we understand, a hostage situation and potentially some casualties unfolding at the Bataclan Concert Theatre, which is also in your district.
Yeah, it might well be. The police sort of, told us all to get out of the streets. inside, then told us to get outside onto the streets again. It all went quiet for a while, and then a whole host of fire brigade trucks and more police turned up. Sorry, I'm just being moved on by the army. Turned up, and there's a lot of activity down here. I don't know whether they think there's somebody still around, but there's a lot of activity down here.
How quickly were the emergency services on the scene?
The police turned up. Sorry, I'm just getting asked to move on. The police turned up very quickly. I was actually helping a woman who wasn't too badly injured, had a lot of blood on her. Hang on, we're getting moved off again. I don't know what's happening, but we're getting moved away. Sorry.
Do you know where they are trying to move you to, Charlie? Because obviously we're hearing that the French police have asked the public to in the Paris region generally to stay indoors. Yeah, we're just being told to go inside, so I'm just going inside the apartment block. So yeah, we've been moved inside now. The army have moved us inside, so I can't see what's going on, but something is obviously going on. They're going up the street, clearing everybody off the street. What have people who were there and saw this happening said to you about the number of people who perhaps were involved in the attack? We've just had reports that there was perhaps one person, possibly more, involved in the attack in the 10th arrondissement nearby, who was then thought to be moving around in a black vehicle of some sort. I certainly heard somebody said that they saw a black vehicle leaving the scene from here. But Charlie, I must interrupt you. Stay with us if you would, because President Obama is just making a speech in Washington addressing the United States on television. Let's listen in.
We stand prepared and ready to provide whatever assistance that the government and the people of France need to respond. France is our oldest ally. The French people have stood shoulder to shoulder with the United States time and again. And we want to be very clear that we stand together with them in the fight against terrorism and extremism. Paris itself represents the timeless values of human progress. Those who think that they can terrorize the people of France or the values that they stand for are wrong. The American people draw strength from the French people's commitment to life, liberty, pursuit of happiness. We are reminded in this time of tragedy that the bonds of liberté and égalité and fraternité are not only values that the French people care so deeply about, but they are values that we share. And those values are going to endure far beyond any act of terrorism or the hateful vision of those who perpetrated the crimes this evening. We're going to do whatever it takes to work with the French people and with nations around the world to bring these terrorists to justice and to go after any terrorist networks that go after our people. We don't yet know all the details of what has happened. We have been in contact with French officials to communicate our deepest condolences to the families of those who've been killed, to offer our prayers and thoughts to those who've been wounded. We have offered our full support to them. The situation is still unfolding. I've chosen not to call President Hollande at this time because my expectation is that he's very busy at the moment. I actually, by coincidence, was talking to him earlier today in preparation for the G20 meeting. But I am confident that I'll be in direct communications with him in the next few days, and we'll be coordinating in any ways that they think are helpful in the investigation of what's happened. This is a heartbreaking situation, and obviously those of us here in the United States know what it's like. We've gone through these kinds of episodes ourselves. And whenever these kinds of attacks happened, we've always been able to count on the French people to stand with us. They have been an extraordinary counterterrorism partner, and we intend to be there with them in that same fashion. I'm I'm sure that in the days ahead we'll learn more about exactly what happened, and my teams will make sure that we are in communication with the press to provide you accurate information. I don't want to speculate at this point in terms of who was responsible for this. It appears that there may still be live activity and dangers that are taking place as we speak. And so until we know from French officials that the situation is under control and we have more information about it, I don't want to speculate. Okay? Thank you very much.
President Obama speaking to the American people on television. We had heard some reports a little earlier from the American authorities suggesting that their belief was that these multiple acts of violence that we've seen take place in Paris this evening were in some way coordinated. We haven't heard that from the French authorities yet, but there are also unconfirmed reports on social media at the moment that there may have been further shootings in other parts of the city, Les Halles, the Louvre and the Pompidou Centre as well. We just heard President Obama saying that he and the United States stand together with Paris, that this was not just an attack on France and Paris, but an attack on all humanity. He talked about the shared values that the United States has with France and offered his condolences to those who have been bereaved or injured in these attacks. So let's just remind you, you're watching live pictures coming here from the centre of Paris. As you can see, there are police, emergency services of all sorts on the scene there. Multiple places around the city. The 10th and the 11th arrondissement, which are just to the northeast of the city centre, are places where some of these attacks have happened. We've also had reports that there have been explosions have gone off near the Stade de France, where France and Germany were playing a friendly match. So as you can see, a very, very confused picture at the moment, waiting to get some details from the police as to how many have died. The current death toll is 40. That's across a number of different attacks. And as we know, there were also reports of hostages having been held at the Bataclan concert theatre. Well, with me now here watching this story unfold is our correspondent, Ben Ando. Ben, let's just work our way through this. First of all, when did these attacks begin?
Well, it all started at sometime after 9 o'clock our time. It does seem to be that at the moment Paris is in what you might call, certainly central Paris, in some kind of state of lockdown. The municipal authorities there are telling Parisians stay indoors. People who were on the streets are being either moved indoors, as we heard Charlie Pitt being moved indoors a short time ago, or some people are tweeting that they're trapped in bars and being told by the police that they're not allowed to leave. In terms of what's actually happened, it's a confusing situation, it's a fluid situation. Our understanding is there have been attacks on bars and restaurants in the 11th and the 10th arrondissements, as well as a grenade attack of some kind near or at the Stade de France, which is where France were playing a friendly match against Germany tonight. Beyond that, there are reports, as you said, of an attack on Les Halles, a large shopping mall in the centre of Paris, possibly gunfire at the Louvre and the Pompidou Centre too. We've just had a statement through from the Foreign Office which says they're very concerned about the attacks in Paris, in close touch with the French authorities and urgently investigating whether any British nationals are caught up in them. And the Foreign Secretary Philip Hammond has just tweeted that he's deeply shocked by these appalling attacks. His thoughts are with the victims and their loved ones, and he's concerned by reports of the hostages taken, because at one of those, the concert hall, the Bataclan, we understand that up to 100 people are being held hostages.
As you say, a number of foreign countries now expressing condolences, and we've also had a message of support from President Obama and David Cameron, the British Prime Minister.
That's right, yes. Mr Cameron saying his thoughts and prayers are with the French people, and that thought actually echoed by the Labour leader Jeremy Corbyn, who said these attacks are heinous and immoral. Now, President Obama's message was very much one of solidarity. He described France as the United States' oldest ally. He mentioned the values of liberté, égalité and fraternité. He said they were values that the American people shared. He said that they would be offering their condolences to any of the victims and the families of the victims of this attack, and that France would stand, that America, the United States of America, would stand with France against whoever is responsible.
Well, we're talking about those sort of statements from statesmen and leaders around the world. The European Commission President Jean-Claude Juncker has said that he is deeply shocked by the attacks in Paris that have left at least 35 people dead. Some suggestions that death toll is actually higher, more around 40. It could be higher than that, of course. We're yet to get an updated figure from the police. Mr. Juncker said, "I'm deeply shocked by the events in Paris. We stand in full solidarity with the people of France." Well, just as we saw just a few moments ago, President Obama addressing the American people, here you can see live pictures of the President of France, François Hollande, also speaking to the people of France. And to the right of that picture, our Europe editor, Katia Adler, is tweeting as she watches President Hollande speaking, saying that he is visibly shaken. Joining us now on the line is Simon Cooper, who is inside the Stade de France. Simon, it was a friendly match and we understand the President was there. What do you know has happened nearby?
We have heard that there were explosions in the neighbourhood outside the stadium, one in a restaurant. I have heard it's grenades, I can't confirm that. And François Hollande was at the game at the beginning and he left during the game, presumably because of what was happening in central Paris with the shootings. There was a huge amount of uncertainty here, but strangely the match was played out and the fans cheered the French goals as if nothing was happening. The Mexican wave happened.
Simon,
it was quite a football match.
I'm just reading, Simon, lots of different new wires, news lines are dropping on the wires. Reuters are reporting that Mr. Hollande has said that this is an unprecedented terrorist attack. It's been underway in Paris, that several dozen people have been killed. He's just decided to declare a state of emergency for the whole of France, and this means that all of the French borders will be closed. That's the latest that's coming to us via our Europe editor, Katia Adler, who's watching the President of France speak. Simon, thanks for staying with us. We were just talking to Simon Cooper there, who was talking about what he thought were explosions that could be heard whilst inside the Stade de France. He hadn't had that confirmed, but he was that he had heard the reports too that some kind of explosions had happened near in a bar near the Stade de France, where that friendly football match was taking place between France and Germany. The French president has also said that we must be united and stay calm. But just to reiterate, he said that he regards these as unprecedented terrorist attacks which have been underway in Paris, in which several dozen people have died. He's also declared a state of emergency and, as a consequence, has chosen to close the French borders. President Hollande will hold a cabinet meeting, which will be at midnight local time, which is around now, actually. He's offered to hold that. The Paris municipality has asked Parisians to stay indoors. And there have been reports of other shootings in the centre of Paris, notably around the Pompidou Centre, the shopping mall Les Halles, and also the Louvre Museum. Well, a short time ago, my colleague Tim Wilcox spoke to Gregory Domine in Paris, who heard the shots while watching a football match at a friend's apartment.
I cannot confirm anything by witnessing it directly, but we were watching the game, and one block from us in the 11th area. So I'm not talking about the restaurant Petit Cambodge at all. I'm talking about a different area in the 11th, which is not very far from
forgive me. So this is a separate incident. Is it near a football stadium? Whereabouts are you talking about?
Not at all. Not at all. I'm not at the football stadium. I'm downtown Paris watching the game home at a friend in the 11th area. I've heard on Twitter the news about the 10th area incident, but we actually heard directly gunshots, and I have to say it was automatic gunshots, 1 block away from here, in the 11th area. So My guess is that there would be one separate incident at Cambodia and a second shooting here in the 11th. Following the feeds on Twitter in French, I read about the third event a bit further on the Boulevard Voltaire at the theater Bataclan.
Okay, so actually, Gregory, I mean, the situation is very confused at the moment, but it does sound as if we are talking about potentially two separate shootings.
Downtown Paris, I would say, I mean, it seems that Cambodia is confirmed. I've seen pictures. And I heard by myself long sequences of automatic gun shooting 1 block away from me, Rue de Charonne, the 11th area. Yes, this I can confirm. And I read other information, but this I cannot confirm at all, about something happening at Bataclan, Boulevard Voltaire. This needs more confirmation.
Okay, and just stay with us, will you please, because we're just getting reports in from a BBC cameraman who's in Paris saying that a gunman's opened fire in a bar on the 11th arrondissement, which is the one you seem to be talking about, Gregory, as well. He says he can see 10 people on the road, either dead or seriously injured. Doesn't know where the gunman is, but the police have just arrived. Are you hearing a lot of police activity and emergency services activity at the moment? If you were able to hear what appeared to you to be automatic gunfire.
I did hear a lot of sirens a few minutes ago, and now it's quite calm. I'm at the window now. You can hear from the courtyard. It's quite silent. How far away
is the restaurant from you, do you think?
Well, I cannot confirm it's a restaurant first. I can just say that 100 meters from here was clear shooting. So I don't know if it's in a restaurant, in a street, or somewhere else.
Gregory Demin speaking a little earlier to my colleague Tim Wilcox, who Gregory had witnessed some of the shootings that have taken place this evening in the French capital. Let's speak, I think, now to our Paris correspondent, Hugh Schofield. Hugh, it's a very confusing picture. We're getting reports that there have been shootings in other places. Tell us the latest of what you're hearing.
Well, I'm right now near this concert hall called the Bataclan, which is a focus of activity. What kind of activity, I don't know, but the police have just pushed us back, and there is a convoy of Red Cross ambulances coming through. The police quite tense, getting quite nervy, pushing us back very forcefully there, so that this large convoy, I can see 8, 10, well, in fact, I can't even see the end of this line of ambulances arriving. That suggests to me that there are victims in the Bataclan, which is this concert hall where we think was one of the focuses of the terrorist attacks this evening. We've understood that there is a siege going on there, that the gunmen who burst in are still there, and there's a big cordon keeping us back about 100 yards in all directions from the Bataclan. And now, as I say, there is this convoy of ambulances arriving, which suggests to me that, either there are victims there or they expect victims, they're readying themselves. It's very, very unclear, but it's tense, and it's a strange atmosphere in Paris tonight.
Yes. Is it clear yet from anybody within the French authorities whether these attacks, and there have been many, of course, are in any way coordinated?
I just don't know the answer to that. I think they probably think yes. I mean, I've just watched François Hollande appear at the end of this emergency cabinet meeting, and he was very forceful, saying these attacks are unprecedented, so putting them on a scale above the Charlie Hebdo attacks at the start of the year. He's announced that there will be a state of emergency in the whole of the country, I think I heard him say, and the borders will be shut. I don't know if you're reporting this, but that's what I've just seen on the Hollande's broadcast on the television. We're just watching it on our mobile phones here. That suggests to me that, that they do regard this as a coordinated attack, and that it is worse than what happened in January, and January was bad enough. But this air of the country being now on a war footing almost is very real.
That is what we've been reporting, Hugh, very much so that President Hollande, when he spoke to the nation just a few moments ago, said that these were unprecedented terrorist attacks, that the borders would be closed because he was declaring a state of emergency. He's also said that operations are underway involving police forces carrying out an assault in Paris. Now, that could be where you're talking about.
I think that he was referring to the Bataclan. The Bataclan is a well-known concert hall. Tonight they were featuring a group which is a well-known group, the Eagles of Death Metal from California. And from the little that I've been able to piece together, and I can't get anything from eyewitnesses here because it's really just journalists and bystanders now. But what I heard earlier on was that the gunmen burst in during a concert, and there were victims among the crowd there. And the assumption is now, and that's what everyone's telling me here, they're not policed because they're not talking, is that there is a situation inside, that the gunmen are inside, it's surrounded, they have hostages maybe. There's every appearance of a siege underway, with maybe an assault being planned. Certainly right in front of me now, though, a long, long line of ambulances. And that, suggests that something very serious is going on here.
Yes, it does. President Hollande also calling for military reinforcements to try to prevent new attacks. And of course, where you are at this concert hall, Hugh, it's just one of a number of locations around the city that have seen violent attacks tonight.
Well, I mean, speaking from where I am, it's very hard to get any picture of what's going on. In a way, you're better off, in a news office, because I'm just picking up what I'm hearing from people around me. And, there's news of, as you said, a shooting just now somewhere else. Earlier I had one in Les Halles. A lot of this may be just rumour, I don't know. In this kind of situation, rumour does fly around. But maybe it is a series of coordinated attacks in all these different locations. It's very, very hard to get any kind of clear picture when you're out and about on the ground, because all you're seeing is what's right in front of you. And here there is clearly something going on, but whether it is the main focus, I don't even know that. It's really like it is a big focus, though. And as you say, when President Hollande spoke about an action going on, then I assume he's referring to what's happening here at the Bataclan.
Indeed, you are offering us the micro level, and we're very grateful for it. It's extremely valuable. Hugh Schofield, thank you very much. That's our Paris correspondent reporting there from the 11th arrondissement, that concert hall, where we understand there's some kind of hostage situation being dealt with by police. Well, I'm joined here in the studio by the French journalist Agnes Poirier. Agnes, you came back from Paris just today.
I did.
Yes, and it was a normal city with no suggestion of any great security presence?
Well, normal city, no, you can't say that, because since January this year, we are at the highest level of alert. It means in the streets of Paris, you see what you didn't used to see before January, that is to say, French army guarding personalities 24 hours a day, and also guarding some, places of worships, Jewish schools, Jewish synagogues, and the Jewish Museum. And we also know that there has been a thwarted attack against a Catholic church in the spring, and so the Cathedral of Notre Dame is heavily guarded and protected. So no, it hasn't been a normal year, and I don't think it's going to go back to normal after what's going on, what's happening as we speak in the streets of Paris.
No, indeed, a state of emergency is being declared. The borders have been closed. I was just reading,
and a curfew as well. Curfew has been declared, and Parisians are told to remain indoors. So.
Not the kind of Friday night where everybody is out and choosing tonight to carry out any kind of attack. You've got a lot of people out on the streets of the city.
Yes, and Paris is one, if not the most visited city in the world. So you add this, and this is the situation you're having. We're talking about coordinated attacks, that's for sure, and we're talking about killers on the run. We're talking about latest I checked, 6 shootings in Paris, and possibly the first suicide bombers in living memory in the streets of Paris, or just outside of Paris, near the Stadium of France. It's not confirmed yet, but they are talking about 2 suicide bombers there, so that would be a first.
It's very difficult to get a clear idea of how many people are involved, whether these attacks were fully coordinated or not, or that is the suspicion of the American authorities. In terms of the number of places that have been targeted tonight, they are not the kind of places that would necessarily be heavily guarded, are they? They're restaurants and bars.
Well, and also, the 11th arrondissement of Paris is actually, a very lively neighborhood. It's not very touristic. It's very Persian, very authentic. The Bataclan is a very well-known venue, very old venue that everybody knows about. Theatre, concert hall. It's near Place de la République. And of course, there was a friendly match going on between France and Germany tonight at the Stadium of France.
The president was there for a while.
Exactly, before he was exfiltrated from the stadium. And there will be a cabinet meeting of the whole government summoned at midnight later.
We're just going to have a look at a map just explaining the geography of this. And you can see just at the top of the picture there, that's where the Stade de France is, where that friendly football match was taking place. A very, very important sports venue, of course, where lots of big events take place. It's in Saint-Denis, I believe, to the north of Paris. Well, a video has emerged that appears to show the moment in the Stade de France when those explosions nearby were heard. There we have that loud noise, which sounded like an explosion. We were speaking earlier to Simon Cooper, who was a spectator inside the stadium, and he heard a noise and suspected said it sounded like an explosion, later had it confirmed that was the case. I'm here in the studio with Agnes Poirier, who's a French journalist who came back from Paris back to London only earlier in the day. You say that there were 2 alerts?
Well, this morning the German team was staying in a hotel on the left bank or the south bank of Paris, and the hotel had to be evacuated because there was a bomb alert. Then 2 hours later, there was a bomb alert, but they didn't find a bomb in one of the stations in Gare de Lyon. And for 2 hours, the Gare de Lyon was evacuated. So, we'll know later whether, there was some sort of intelligence that we missed, or it might be linked.
The suggestion on social media is that this is the first time since the Algerian War of the early 1960s, since there was a state of emergency declared for the whole of the French territory. How significant is that? If that's true, how significant is it?
Well, if you remember, during the riots in November 2005, a state of emergency was declared, actually, for, I think it was 10 days. And at the time, we said this is, a first, or it hadn't happened in decades. I mean, it is extremely rare. And President Hollande also talked about a new alert level called Alpha, which I had never heard about. So this is obviously a military plan.
A lot of details that we need to explore further. For the moment, Agnes, thank you very much. Well, on the line is Caddy Neveu, manager of Les Petits Papiers restaurant, which is very close to the scene of one of tonight's shootings. Caddy, tell us exactly where your restaurant is in relation to the locations that have been under attack.
We are not far from the Bataclan.
So are you in the 11th arrondissement as well?
Yes. We are at 300 meters.
So what can you see and what have you been hearing from where you are?
What?
What have you been hearing?
We heard the shoots. Like Kalashnikov, comme ça. After that, nothing. 5 minutes later, another shooting. Then we heard the people who is running in the street. We saved many people here. After that, nothing. After we see the police and the pompiers.
The fire brigade?
Yes, that's all.
They came as well. We've seen pictures of many vehicles, police vehicles and ambulances as well. What is the advice that you are receiving?
They say to us to stay inside and close the doors. That's all.
How many people are in your restaurant at the moment?
There are many people now, maybe, I don't know, 60 or more.
Oh, and what are they saying to you? What is the atmosphere like?
They are shocked. They are they cry. They are not in their normal behavior.
No, of course. And this year has been a very difficult year for Paris, beginning in January with Charlie Hebdo, which must be in your thoughts.
When on January, it was not like today. Today is very, very horrible.
So we wish you a safe night, Kadi. Thank you very much for talking to us. Kadi Neveu there from the Petit Papier restaurant, which is near to the Bataclan concert hall in the 11th arrondissement, where, as we were hearing from our Paris correspondent, Hugh Schofield, who was outside the concert hall, that some kind of police operation was underway. A great deal of reports happening, coming to us from social media, which suggest a very bleak picture at the concert theatre. We won't dwell on those until we've had them confirmed, but it does seem as if a number of hostages have managed to escape, but it does appear that at one point up to 100 people were inside the building and the police were there trying to get them to safety. These are the live pictures coming to us from Paris. You can see everywhere you look. This traffic is stationary. The only vehicles that are really moving are those belonging to the ambulances, the police, the fire brigade. We've heard that the army are also on the streets as well. A great deal of confusion, though. Agnes Poirier is with us, a French journalist who spends her time in London and also in France. Agnes, tell us a little bit about the geography of some of this, because we know that there was one of the attacks was in the 10th arrondissement. That was at the Cambodian restaurant, but this appears to have been possibly two locations in the 10th.
I've just been told that the first shooting took place at Rue Bichat, which is near the hospital Bichat, and a man came out of his car and started shooting in the crowd.
So whereabouts is that in relation to these others?
It's not very far. I mean, Paris is not very big, but that's in the same kind of very authentic, very Parisian neighborhood, not very touristic. Quite central, though, near Place de la République. And also, I've just been told that schools tomorrow would remain closed. So, this is also, I think it's interesting that President Hollande, who appeared rather moved, it's the first time I see him, in that state, said, we know who did it. We'll know more, and the borders are closed.
But to know so quickly and to be so emphatic about
there's still some intelligence coming in every day. Obviously, they were not fast enough, but I think it's the same in Britain. Intelligence is coming every day, and there are attacks you cannot just prevent. That's the situation today in Europe.
How has the atmosphere in Paris changed this year, since January, when those appalling events happened at the Charlie Hebdo satirical magazine offices, where 12 people were killed, and then of course there was the hostage situation at the Jewish supermarket in Porte de Vincennes.
Yes.
And 4 people died there, and the gunman was finally shot. And that's how we began this year. Yeah. How has the atmosphere in the city changed?
It's interesting. This morning, a survey was published in Le Parisien, and it was, what are the French concerned about? The first topic was unemployment, and second, for the first time, was terrorism. Before, only 2% of the French people were concerned by terrorism. Now it's 20%. They put terrorism as their, main concern. So obviously, it becomes a new normal.
Agnes, stay with us if you would, because a little earlier we spoke to Charlie Pitt. He's a freelance cameraman in Paris, and he was just 30 metres from a bar where people were shot just after 9 p.m. local time.
So I'm in the 11th, about 75 metres from the Belle Kip cafe that was hit about 10 past 9. I'd just been to the supermarket, just walked past the front of the cafe. It's a popular, typical French cafe. People were sitting outside, and I'd literally got about 30 metres when I thought it was a firecracker to start off with, and then it went on, it got louder. And it went on for about a minute. Everybody sort of dived for cover thinking it was gunfire. And it went on for about a minute. Then there was a pause for about 15 seconds, and then it all started up again. We all sort of left, and then it sort of calmed down a bit. So I walked back to the front of the cafe, and there was a whole pile of bodies, probably about 7 on the left-hand side, and about 4 that had been sitting at the tables outside on the right-hand side, and a lot of injured. I saw a woman who'd obviously been shot in the leg, and then the police turned up, and now we're sort of shoved about 75 metres away. A lot of fire brigade, a lot of police, a lot of army patrolling the streets, keeping everybody away.
Charlie, we're trying to get a sense of the geography of this, because obviously the different districts, the arrondissement in Paris, they sort of circle out, don't they, like a spiral from the very centre. We were just talking to a journalist who was in the 10th arrondissement, not far from you, where an attack happened on an Asian Cambodian restaurant. You're at this bar in the 11th arrondissement, but there's also, we understand, a hostage situation and potentially some casualties unfolding at the Bataclan concert theatre, which is also in your district.
Yeah, it might well be. The police sort of, told us all to get out of the streets inside, then told us to get outside onto the streets again. It all went quiet for a while, and then a whole host of fire brigade trucks and more police turned up. Sorry, I'm just being moved on by the army. Turned up, and there's a lot of activity down here. I don't know whether they think there's somebody still around, but there's a lot of activity down here.
How quickly were the emergency services on the scene?
The police turned up. Sorry, I'm just getting asked to move on. The police turned up very quickly. I was actually helping a woman who wasn't too badly injured, had a lot of blood on her. Hang on, we're getting moved off again. I don't know what's happening, but we're getting moved away. Sorry.
Do you know where they are trying to move you to, Charlie? Because obviously we're hearing that the French police have asked the public to in the Paris region generally to stay indoors.
Yeah, we're just being told to go inside, so I'm just going inside the apartment block. So, yeah, we've been moved inside now. The army have moved us inside, so I can't see what's going on, but something is obviously going on. They're going up the street, clearing everybody off the street.
That was Charlie Pitt, a freelance cameraman who was close to one of the locations where one of the attacks happened this evening. These are the live pictures coming to us from Paris. We're trying to piece together the events that have happened in the French capital this evening at multiple locations. The Stade de France to the north of the city, in 2 of the districts, the arrondissement, the 10th and the 11th, where a number of places have been attacked. We're also getting reports that the Louvre and the shopping centre Les Halles and also the Pompidou Centre, very, very famous French landmarks, have also been under attack today. Well, with us now is Nabila Ramdani, who's a French-Algerian journalist who specialises in French politics and the Middle East. Nabila, thank you very much for joining us under these dreadful circumstances. You've been talking to people in Paris at these locations. Tell us about what they've been telling you.
Well, there's an atmosphere of absolute, tragedy and indeed panic on the streets of Paris. People are being told, to evacuate the places like restaurants and indeed concert halls where they have been going to, on a Friday night, relaxing, going to for dinner with friends or family outside or attending a concert. They're now being told to go back home and stay at home. But of course, the obvious problem they are facing at the moment is how to go back home. They think that French transports are not even safe to get on board, and that's the situation. They're certainly not reassured. at this particular moment in time.
Even with these scenes that we've got in front of us of various locations in Paris, of many police officers out on the streets, there are ambulances, blue lights flashing, even the army on the street. It's still no guarantee of safety at the moment.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, as soon as the first elements of attacks were came to the attention of the president and indeed his government, they have been holding the equivalent of a Cobra meeting and talking about how to deal with this, what President Hollande called unprecedented attacks. So they're very much focused on trying to find out who's been involved, how many people, what kind of weapons they have been using in particular, and how to catch the people behind the attacks at this very early stage. That's their absolute challenge at this moment.
The reports that we're getting, certainly Reuters are reporting that 40 people have been killed, at least in multiple locations. 60 others are thought to have been wounded. These numbers are very likely to change, aren't they? We've also got this unfolding situation at the Bataclan concert hall, where there seems to be some kind of siege. Very, very worrying, shocking reports on social media that we can't confirm yet. But the police are very much trying to get people to safety at the Bataclan.
Yes, I mean, this is an absolute tragedy, and the scale of it is absolutely staggering. You're talking about a situation involving gun-wielding, Kalashnikov-wielding gunmen, explosions, hostage-taking situation as well.
Yes, and in fact, we're just hearing via Reuters, quoting an eyewitness, that 5 explosions have now been heard near the Bataclan concert hall, which appears to be a new development. Automatic gunfire heard outside the Bataclan concert hall as well, where an attacker or attackers, we don't know how many yet, are holding people hostage. We talk about the scale of these attacks. So many, we don't even know how many yet, but all in a relatively small area. Not surprising that the President, in his address to the French people, declared a state of emergency, but also chose to close all of the borders.
Indeed,
France.
Indeed, and that's what emerged effectively from the early meeting he held with his advisors and indeed his government. They're trying to react firmly to what is an absolutely dreadful situation, especially as it involved soft targets, people at their most relaxed, enjoying a Friday night out, either at the football stadium or in restaurants, or indeed attending a concert, or indeed just standing by. People I've been speaking to in Paris are describing scenes with corpses on the streets of Paris. So, the atmosphere is absolutely one of fear.
Not surprising at all. And the latest developments that we're hearing regarding the attack that happened at the Bataclan concert hall, 5 explosions have been heard out in the last few minutes. This is Reuters quoting a witness. This is in the 11th arrondissement of Paris, which you see to the bottom of the screen. They're not very far away from the Petit Cambodge restaurant where a shooting happened earlier. There's also the Belle Équipe restaurant bar, which is in the 11th arrondissement, which is close to the Bataclan concert hall as well. So 5 explosions heard, where police are mounting some sort of assault to try to keep safe those people who we understand have been held hostage in that concert hall. Messages of support, as you would expect, from other world leaders, President Obama, David Cameron. To what extent do you think that French politicians will want to turn to their allies abroad for help with this?
Well, I think it has become absolutely crucial that a terrorist attack like that, on that scale, in the heart of a Western capital, in Paris, will get other Western leaders extremely worried. They have been prompt to show their support for the French and indeed express their sadness at what is an absolute tragedy. And I think what the French will be looking at, coordinating their anti-terrorism combat effectively with other Western capitals, and that would involve sharing intelligence. It seems that the French government lacks that kind of information. The very fact that they have shut their borders seems to suggest that they fear a threat from abroad. Let's not forget that Hollande is a socialist president at home, but when it comes to foreign policy, he's very much a hawk. So they will be looking at possible threats from outside, perhaps linked to France's involvement in conflict zones abroad.
Nabila, for the moment, thank you very, very much. It's very good to get that sort of wider international perspective. You're watching BBC News and we're reporting a story that is very much unfolding, a great deal of confusion still regarding the situation in Paris tonight. Just before 9 o'clock local time, there were reports of a number of violent attacks, violent acts in different parts of France. If we begin with the north of the city in Saint-Denis, there we have the Stade de France, a very famous football or sports stadium where tonight France and Germany were playing a friendly. President Hollande was at that match for a short period of time until he was brought away, we assume because of reports of other attacks that were happening elsewhere. Further south, we go to this Petit Cambodge restaurant, which is in the 10th arrondissement, not very far away from the very, very centre of Paris. It's just to the northeast of the very heart of the city. Well, let's look at this footage, which has come into us in the past few minutes via social media, and we believe that it was filmed outside this Cambodian restaurant, the Petit Cambodge, which isn't very far away from the Bataclan venue, also in the northeast of Paris. Let's have a look at this footage.
Qu'est-ce qui s'est passé, monsieur? Qu'est-ce qui s'est passé?
So there we can see some footage that somebody had filmed on their mobile phone already. The police and the ambulances seem to be in attendance. You can see, although the pictures aren't still, we can see the blue lights in the distance there, and a great deal of people out on the streets, obviously wondering at this point what was happening. If we take you back to the map again, there were a couple of explosions that were heard outside the Stade de France, and we heard from a man who was inside the Stade de France that he thought that he'd heard something that sounded like an explosion. Well, it appears to show that on this footage. Let's look at this. At that point, of course, nobody knew quite what they were hearing. They thought it was some kind of explosion. Well, the man I referred to a moment ago is Simon Cooper. He's a journalist who's in Paris, and he was watching that football match inside the Stade de France.
We have heard that there were explosions in the neighbourhood outside the stadium, one in a restaurant. I have heard it's grenades. I can't confirm that. And Francois Hollande was at the game at the beginning, and he left during the game. Presumably because of what was happening in central Paris with the shootings. There was a huge amount of uncertainty here, but strangely the match was played out and the fans cheered the French goals as if nothing was happening. The Mexican wave happened.
Simon,
it was quite a football match.
Simon Cooper, who was inside the Stade de France and heard that explosion that we showed you a few minutes ago. At that point, nobody really knew what they were listening to. They thought that it sounded like some kind of bomb, but of course it wasn't confirmed at that point. The French President, François Hollande, has been on TV to address the nation. He said that terrorist attacks were underway on an unprecedented scale in France.
Mes chers compatriotes, au moment où je m'exprime,
my dear countrymen, as I speak, terrorist attacks on an unprecedented scale are taking place in the Paris region. There are several dozen dead, lots more wounded. It's horrific. We have, on my orders, mobilized all the forces we can muster in order to neutralize the terrorist threat and to secure all the affected areas. I've also asked for military reinforcements. They too are in the Paris area to make sure no new attack can take place.
That was President Hollande speaking to the French people on television just a short time ago. Well, the British Prime Minister David Cameron has expressed his condolences. He said, "I'm shocked by the events in Paris. Our thoughts and prayers are with the French people." He went on to say, "We will do whatever we can to help." President Obama has also spoken on television to the American people. He says, once again, "We've an outrageous attempt to terrorise innocent civilians." And he went on to say that we stand prepared and ready to provide whatever assistance the people of France need. He also said that this is not just an attack on France and Paris, it's an attack on all humanity, people who share our values. The UN Secretary-General Ban Ki-moon has made a statement too. The Secretary-General condemns the despicable terrorist attacks carried out today in and around Paris. He said, "We demand the immediate release of the numerous individuals held hostage in the Bataclan theatre." So there have been all sorts of messages of support as well from the European Commission President Jean-Claude Juncker, who also offered any kind of assistance that France would need. Well, on the line now is Chris Phillips, former head of the National Counter-Terrorism Security Office. Mr. Phillips, thank you very much for joining us.
You're welcome.
We are very confused, really, by what we're seeing. Can you give us any sort of perspective from your area of expertise on what seems to be unfolding in France?
Yeah, very much so. This is a pretty classic, multi-faceted, multi-coordinated attack, all happening at the same time, a series of attacks designed to confuse the public, but also terrify the public. And clearly that's what's going on over there. The whole idea is, you have to remember with terrorism that it's actually aimed at the public. It's trying to frighten people. And that's what it's doing.
Any doubt in your mind that these were coordinated attacks? The American authorities have suggested that that's their belief.
Yeah, almost certainly. This is a planned attack. I would suggest that probably these are people that are on the sort of watch list of French authorities, but but of course you can't watch everyone at the same time. So it's really difficult for the police and security services to keep everyone being monitored, and individuals can actually go off and do this. But this seems to be a group of people that have planned this in advance with good weaponry and are really wreaking havoc in Paris.
And the night that they've chosen, Friday nights in many cities, a very busy time for people to be out and about, enjoying themselves, relaxing after the end of a busy week.
Absolutely, and you will. The whole point of this is to kill people, unfortunately, and if you want to kill people, then you go to crowded places. If you go to crowded places, then you'll go to nightclubs, bars, restaurants, sporting stadia and things, which is exactly what they've done.
Of course, after the Charlie Hebdo shootings earlier in the year, and also that siege at the Jewish supermarket, there was an increase in security on particular sites that the French authorities thought could be a target, places where public buildings, for example, places of worship. This is different, isn't it? Restaurants and bars.
Yeah, but this is pretty standard for the type of attack that we're seeing. This is what's been attacked. Also, places like hotels are generally targeted. You have to understand the mentality. The mentality of a terrorist attack is to frighten people and cause terror to the society, to say that this is our message. The longer this goes on, the better it is for the terrorists, because they can actually get maximum publicity out of it.
The reaction by the French authorities, as announced on television by the French president, is that they've declared a state of emergency. Obviously, a state of emergency in France might be slightly different from Britain, but what broadly does that mean?
Well, what that means is that they'll be calling in as many resources as they can. There's clearly going to be an ongoing long-term impact from this. But of course, when you have a state of emergency, you can only keep it up for so long. There's not enough police officers in Paris, France, and if it had happened in the UK, it would have been exactly the same. You call people in, but actually it can only last for a certain amount of time.
And the decision to close the borders, why do that?
Well, you have to get some control, and this is the point. They don't know where these people have come from. There's a fair chance that they've actually come, from the war zone, especially if they've got weapons that are effectively military weapons, hand grenades and the such. There's a fair chance that these people have actually come from the war zone. So you just want to do everything you can to prevent anyone else coming in and being part of this.
Yes, our Europe editor, Cathy Adler, has just tweeted French borders are not completely shut, although I understand that's the intention. We understand closures essentially aimed at restricting people from leaving France. And one other development that I need to tell you about, one of the attackers at the Bataclan concert hall, where at least 15 people are thought to have died, apparently fired into the crowd, shouting, Allah Akbar, God is greatest. According to this witness, this is. What that means in terms of any allegiances that these attackers may have, we just don't know right now. But how much international cooperation, Chris Phillips, is France going to need to deal with this?
Well, first and foremost, France has got almost a bigger problem than the UK with extremists. It's got an enormous number of people that have come through, into its borders, particularly on the outskirts of Paris. So they've got their own particular problems. But let's be quite clear. This is potentially going to change the way Europe operates as well, because we've allowed lots and lots of people to come into the countries from a war zone, and we could reap the whirlwind of that over the coming months.
Many people, though, will be very reluctant to make that leap, won't they? Because just because you allow somebody to come in from the war zone, they perhaps come as a refugee, desperate to escape a country that none of us know how anyone can live in anymore, namely Syria and parts of Iraq. It's a big leap to have to make, though, isn't it, for a lot of people? That this is what you reap.
We mustn't put everyone under the same banner, but of course it's a fantastic opportunity for terrorists to get themselves into a country, and we're pretty certain that that's happening amongst the groups of people that have come in. But of course France has got its own problems as well. It's already got people that have shown themselves to be willing to kill people in Paris, and we've got exactly the same problem in the UK. It's just tonight, unfortunately, Paris is suffering.
We're just reading via the AFP news agency that the police have now stormed the Bataclan concert hall, where attackers had opened fire on the crowd and people had been taken hostage. How much of a risk is it in mounting an operation like that to try and get people out of a building where you don't necessarily know quite what's going on inside, and there are certainly people who are armed?
You're damned if you do, and you're damned if you don't, because if they don't go in there, then more people are likely to die. But of course, by them going in there, they are taking a massive risk. They'll know very little about the building. They'll know very little about the people that they're likely to face. You have to feel, a great deal for the police officers that have got to go in and try to identify people that are terrorists from innocents.
We've obviously seen the police out in huge numbers on the streets of Paris in various different places. It must be quite difficult to know quite where to focus your resources when you're dealing with, as you say, a multifaceted, multi-location problem that's developing. What role, though, do the army have? Because President Hollande, in his address, called for more military reinforcement.
Yeah, well, in France, they've got a slightly different policing system, so they do make much more use of the military within their policing than we do in the UK. But all countries are going to have to revisit how they police major attacks like this, because there just aren't enough police officers, firearms trained, SWAT teams to be able to deal with a series of events happening at the same time.
Chris Phillips, former head of the National Counter-Terrorism Security Office, we really appreciate you talking to us tonight. Thank you very much. Well, on the line now is Robert, who's a police officer from England who was close to one of the locations that came under attack earlier today. Robert, thanks for joining us. You were out and about there for the weekend. Tell us what happened.
We were sat outside eating our dinner and heard about 10 or 11 now bangs. And being in the UK, used to loud bangs, fireworks night, and the gendarmes that were just right by where we were eating ran around the corner, and then they were followed by a number of other gendarmes, and a number of emergency vehicles came flying around the corner as well.
We understand that you were at a bar at on Rue de Charonne. Which of the locations were you closest to? Because some of them are quite close together.
Yeah, I think we were near the initial shooting at possibly the concert venue.
Well, Robert, we appreciate you talking to us. Keep safe, because everyone's being advised not to be out and about. I'm sure you know how to keep yourself safe. Thank you very much for talking to us, and thanks for waiting to speak to us tonight. Our correspondent in Paris, Hugh Schofield, is on the line. Hugh, when we spoke to you last, you were very close to the Bataclan concert theatre. Tell us more.
Yeah, well, that's still where I was, and we're still being kept way back. What's happened in between is about 10, 15 minutes ago, a series of noises, bangs. I mean, the first lot sounded to me like gunfire, and the second lot sounded to me like detonations. Very reminiscent to me of the Jewish supermarket incident in January, where again we were kept back, and then there were these explosions that you could hear, but of course in the distance, and that, it turned out, was the police going in, or the special forces going in. Maybe it was that. I just don't know. I mean, nothing substantial has happened since then. There hasn't been a great outpouring of ambulances or anything like that. We're still very much us all waiting around and trying to figure out what's going on, with the news filtering out now that there are these large numbers apparently inside. I mean, I don't know how accurate these reports are of there being a lot of people inside, but I mean, if that is the case, obviously it is very serious indeed. I mean, I don't know what you're hearing, but the rumour here is 60, 80, 100 people might be inside. But I mean, that is simply what's the sort of talk among journalists and bystanders here. Yes,
that's certainly the case. Earlier on in the evening, we were told that 15 people had died in the shooting at the Bataclan. 35 people, then 60 people, then 100 people were being held hostage. There were also reports that one or two of them had managed to escape. But there were some very worrying reports on social media that we haven't had confirmed, so we haven't been reporting about what was going on inside. So it's very difficult, and I'm sure the police are not keen, given the number of people who could be at risk, to tell anybody very much.
No, absolutely right. And the fact that we know nothing, I mean, we just got to kind of accept that. And there will be a lot of gossip going round, but obviously the priority is to have a news clampdown. If that is what it takes, then that is what it takes. And we'll just have to wait for the denouement and hope that the police action is as efficient as it was, of course, back in January, where they went in and dealt so effectively with Ahmadi Coulibaly. But it does sound like this is a much more complicated situation if there are lots of people there with gunmen. And it sounds, from what I've seen on social media, again, that there were 2 or 3 gunmen who went in. I mean, if they're among the hostages inside, then I mean, to go in and just pick them off is not going to be easy with a stun grenade or whatever. I mean, it's not going to be the same situation at all as at the supermarket back in January.
No, and of course the police never approach a situation like this lightly, do they? Because of the risks involved.
Absolutely not. I mean, I think back in January with Coulibaly, I mean, they took their time. They worked out that he was alone, that there was a certain number of people in there with him. They knew roughly where they were in the building, and it was, relatively, compared to this, clean-cut situation. This is going to be far more complicated because it's a whole building, a theatre with all sorts of rooms and anti-rooms. They could be anywhere. They could have groups of hostages here, there. They could have put in explosives. They could, given the scale of what's been mounted tonight, they cannot assume anything. And there will be great fears among any relative or friend of the people inside that this could go wrong. So I think they will approach this with a great deal of caution, and which makes me wonder, what were those explosions a short time ago? I mean, there are now more ambulances arriving. 3 SAMU 78. That's the sort of emergency services they've just pulled up. But otherwise, it's static here. And as I say, if it was the sort of the storming, which people seem to think it was, that took place when those explosions happened, it doesn't seem to have triggered anything. There hasn't been a great sort of wave of ambulances coming out or activity of any kind. So I think it's still the status quo.
Hugh Schofield, thank you very much. That's our Paris correspondent who's very close to the Bataclan concert theatre, where we understand there's a siege involving numerous hostages. These are the live pictures coming from that part of Paris, which is one of several locations which have seen violent attacks throughout the evening. As you can see, as Hugh said, a lot of emergency service vehicles arriving near the Bataclan. Well, other BBC networks joining us now. Let us remind you of what we're watching here. Latest pictures coming to us from various places in Paris where multiple violent attacks have taken place, including shootings and also explosions going off. We know that explosions happened outside the Stade de France to the north of Paris, where a friendly football match was taking place between France and Germany, but also close to bars and restaurants further into the heart of the city. And we need to speak again to Hugh Schofield, our Paris correspondent, who made his way a little while ago to this Bataclan concert theatre, which is in the 11th arrondissement of Paris, where there was a concert underway. Very busy tonight, Hugh, because it's a Friday night.
Yeah. Sorry, yes, I was just talking to an ambulance man there. He's saying he's come all the way from Versailles, and he's just driving up, and he says he's just here he doesn't know what's going on, but he's coming a long way. In other words, the whole of the Ile-de-France region has been mobilised, and ambulances are obviously coming in from a very long distance, and he just says, I'm here in reinforcement, I have no idea what I'm going to be doing. So that's why these literally, I think 15 or 20 ambulances have arrived now. Yes, you're right. I mean, it was it's a lovely, calm, warm evening. People will have been out and about. It's Friday night. There will have been a lot of people on the streets. And in this concert, it's Friday night in an area of town around the Canal Saint-Martin. If you know that area, the Place de la République, Overcamp, very, very trendy. Very, very young, very, very buzzy. Lots of people have been out, as I say, a warm evening, so people on the streets enjoying, very, very pleasant early November evening. And at this concert hall, well, the Bataclan is one of the great venues of Paris, and this was quite a well-known Californian band, as I understand it, that was playing there, we understand. Well, yes, I mean, if it's true that the bulk of people are inside, being held hostage, then it's an absolutely frightful situation.
Hugh, you're pretty close to this concert hall, aren't you? Obviously, you're being kept back to a certain extent. Tell us how far away you are.
Well, I'm probably 100, 200 metres from it. I mean, I can't quite see it because I'm on the Boulevard Voltaire, which is the main road, and it's just around the corner down a side street. I can see a line of police vehicles leading all the way down and behind a police cordon, and every now and again we're told to budge, and ambulances are going through. And it was that, is that 200-metre distance that we heard those bangs a short time ago. But it's very hard to make anything out. All I can see really down there is sort of lights flashing, a blue light flashing, and vehicles, and that's that. I mean, it's really very indistinct.
It's very difficult when you're in just one location and as close as you are to it to get a sort of wider picture. But I'm sure news will have reached you of what President Hollande was saying when he addressed France on television a little while ago, talking about this state of emergency, the fact that the borders are to be closed to prevent people, coming in and out of the country. How's that being received by the people around you?
Well, I mean, we were all around a couple of mobile phones when he was speaking, well, I mean, part of the reaction was normal political stuff, I'm afraid. But I think it is significant what you said. It is the first time since the Algerian War that the whole of the country has been in a state of emergency. In the riots of 2005, there were parts of the country which were under a state of emergency, but this is the whole of the country. So that's unprecedented, and it's closing the borders, of course, also, though in a sense that was coming anyway because of the big climate conference, which is kicking off in a couple of weeks. And that was the stage where they feared there would be a a potential terrorist attack, and that the closure of the borders was, or at least the suspension of the Schengen Agreement was due to come in preparation for that. But now, clearly, that's been totally eclipsed by this. And I mean, the mood, I think, is eerie. I mean, wandering around the streets as I arrived here, it was just sinking in, as I say, in this very buzzy area of the 11th, what had happened. And I saw one woman on her knees crying because she'd just heard that her friend was in the Bataclan concert hall during the concert, and then all the bars are sort of semi-shut. All the sort of the blinds are sort of half down, and there are people inside looking out. Some of them being told not to move, but they're sort of edging out and taking a look on the streets. There's been altercations I've seen between locals looking out, sort of wondering what's going on, probably not realising the gravity of the situation, and just sort of shouting at the police, saying, what's going on, and the police getting quite aggressive back. It's very, very eerie, and especially when there's this message from the prefecture of the police as well, saying, if you're in the Ile-de-France, in other words, the whole of the Paris region, stay at home. I mean, that's quite a sort of staggering piece of advice to people. It's like saying the home counties, stay at home, because we don't know what's gone on. We don't know what is going on. We don't know if there are more people out there. It was a little like that in the Charlie Hebdo events, but this is worse. I mean, because it's so. The whole seems to be so much bigger. It seems to be so much more random, and therefore so much more frightening.
Hugh, for the moment, thank you very much. Hugh Schofield, our Paris correspondent, with the latest from close to the Bataclan concert hall. Hugh says he's 100, 200 metres away. Can't quite see the building, but he's very much aware of, as we can see from these pictures, how much activity there has been. He says it appears to be the status quo. He hasn't seen people leaving the Bataclan concert theatre, which is where we understand up to 100 people thought to have been taken hostage after an attacker or gunman, multiple gunmen, stormed the building. With us now in the studio is Raffaello Pantucci, who's Director of International Security Studies at the Royal United Services Institute in London. Raffaello, thank you very much for joining us and sitting patiently, listening to all of this. These developments that we're trying to get to grips with coming out of Paris. Your first initial observation?
Well, I think it's very difficult to know exactly what we're looking at this point. I think what we know for certain is that we're dealing with a fairly well-coordinated attack which involved multiple targets, one suspects multiple individuals, using what appear to be automatic weapons and explosives, all of which are things which require training and preparation. So I think we can pretty confidently say that this is something which has been being prepared for some time.
And so across multiple locations, and it could be as many as maybe 6, 7, we're hearing, a coordinated attack in your view?
I think so. I mean, I think what we don't know about all of these sites where we're hearing reports of incidents is how they're all connected. If we're dealing with lots of individual groups and cells who are doing each of these attacks, if we're dealing with people who are sort of jumping on the moment and deciding this is the moment that they should strike and they've been thinking about it for some time. Or if we're dealing with people who are mobile and running around the city. I think we have to think about this. On the one hand, you could look back to the Charlie Hebdo attack of earlier this year, but I would argue that it's possible that we should look to the Mumbai attacks of 2008 as a sort of earlier example of what we're actually looking at, where we had a group of attackers targeting the city, going from target to target, shooting as many people as they can, blowing themselves up, and then ultimately holding themselves up in one place where they kind of fought to the death.
Let me just bring you a couple of details that are coming to us via Reuters. They're saying that the police operation at the Bataclan concert theatre, where we understood up to 100 people had been held hostage, that operation is now over. We hope to get more details from the police when they're in a position to explain just exactly what's been going on inside that building, which was packed on a Friday night. There was a heavy metal concert taking place, a band playing, come from California. The British Foreign Office is advising that people who have concerns about British friends or relatives who are in Paris have a number to call. It's a London number, it's the main switchboard, and I'll repeat it a couple of times for you. apologies if you're watching abroad and this is of no use to you at all. The number is 0207 0081 500. That is for assistance for people who are concerned about friends or relatives who may be in Paris. This is for British friends or relatives who the British Foreign Office can help with. It's the number is 0207 0081 500. If you need to get that number again, I imagine it will now have been posted on the British Foreign Office website. With us, trying to assess quite what we're looking at, is Raffaello Pantucci from the Royal United Services Institute. We had a statement not so long ago that you and I were looking at, Raffaello, from the New York Police Department regarding these attacks, and obviously they're extending their thoughts to their counterparts in France, but they are also deploying officers to French government locations in the United States, notably New York City. It's an obvious thing to do, but worth reporting.
Certainly it is. And I mean, I think that you're going to see, after an incident like this, in other major cities, there will immediately be some concern about the possibility of a sort of copycat incident or some other sort of attack, or it's a show of strength. People will be alarmed by something like this, and people will worry that could this happen to us. And so a sort of show of strength is as much a sort of thing to show the people that we're out there and we're going to defend you from this.
Raffaello, stay with us if you would, but I'm going to speak now to our correspondent Lucy Williamson, who's in Paris, and hopefully can give us an overview of all the different threads of this multifaceted and multi-location story which is unfolding. Lucy, can you bring us up to date with what you're hearing?
Yeah, it's a little difficult to hear your question over the police van going past, but just behind me is the Bataclan concert hall where the hostages are being held, and we are told that the assault has been ongoing there. We've heard some gunfire. An awful lot of police and security forces have been cordoning off this road, and we are told that the assault is underway.
We have had reports that the assault is over, that the police operation at the Bataclan is over. Often here in the studio we can get a bigger, better, clearer overview than you can on the scene. How many members of the public, though, are out and about? Because we've been reporting that the mayor of Paris has said that the city is effectively in lockdown. Don't go out.
That has been the advice given, and behind me, I don't know if you can see, but there is a small crowd of onlookers just waiting at a police cordon there, and we have seen several people wandering around the street. I mean, one thing to say is that this area would normally be packed at midnight on a Friday night. It's almost deserted, eerily empty streets, and really just a small gaggle of people gathered here to try and find out a bit more about what's going on in their city.
And what are they saying to you about what they understand has happened in Paris tonight? We've heard the statement from President Hollande that this is the most significant series of terror attacks that they've had in France. And of course, it comes after the events in January of Charlie Hebdo and the Jewish supermarket.
I think the fact that so many people are staying away and staying indoors tells you just the level of fear that's here in the city tonight. Just 10 months after the Charlie Hebdo attacks, we have these attacks that show at least some similar hallmarks, attacks with guns on soft targets, if you like, and a hostage situation, explosives being used. I think it's going to bring back some very painful memories for people here in Paris. And yes, the streets here tonight are certainly pretty quiet. There's a lot of questions people want answered.
Lucy, for the moment, thank you very much. Lucy Williamson with the latest from the 11th arrondissement, close to the Bataclan concert theatre. Well, this is footage that came into us via social media not so long ago, and we believe that it was filmed outside the Cambodian restaurant in the 10th arrondissement called Petit Cambodge. It isn't far from the Bataclan venue that we were just speaking to Lucy from, northeast of the very centre of Paris. The footage appears to show the aftermath of one of the attacks. You may find it distressing. You can see the emergency services in the background, the flashing blue lights of police cars and ambulances who came to the scene pretty fast, we understand from eyewitnesses. A police cordon put up very quickly after what witnesses said were gunmen more than one, armed with Kalashnikov assault rifles, who fired at diners through the plate glass windows. And the result was multiple casualties. There were reports of people outside the restaurant who seriously injured. This is just one of these multiple locations. According to some reports that we're hearing, there may be as many as 6 or even 7 different locations around Paris. The furthest out seems to be in Saint-Denis, which is where a bar close to the Stade de France sports stadium appears to have been attacked with some kind of explosions. Police saying there was 1 bomb and 2 suicide bombers. Let's recap on the events in just a moment, but just a reminder that Raffaele Pantucci from the Royal United Services Institute in London is here with us now. Where does France go from here? We already know that from the beginning of the year, in various places around Paris, there were increased security presences, army seen on the street quite regularly, and people got used to that. What more do they do?
Well, I think you're going to have a lot of questions being asked in France about what more they do have to do at this point. I think really since last year, you've seen a sort of tempo of attacks and disruptive plots and actual assaults happening in France has been going up to quite a substantial number. The question about what can the police do next, I think you'll see them revisiting an awful lot of their case files, looking again at people, trying to pick people up who they were maybe slightly concerned about and were less a priority and now will become a greater priority. I think you'll see that there will clearly have to be military put on the streets. I think the president's already been talking about this, to deploy at sites, not only to act as a protection, but also to act as a comfort to people, to show them that the government is reacting and that security can be stepped up.
It's a difficult call, though, isn't it? Because Jens Stoltenberg, the Secretary General of NATO, has said that terrorism will never defeat democracy. Carry on as usual. Don't let the terrorists change your way of life. But if you've got the army out on the streets of Paris in greater numbers, it does change things.
Well, I mean, it depends what they're doing. If you go to Brussels, if you've been to Brussels any time in the past year, you'll have seen quite heavily armed soldiers standing outside most of the sort of official buildings around the city. And quite frankly, on my many visits there, I didn't see people, frankly, acting any differently as a result of it. It is sort of intimidating, but it seems to be, unfortunately, the way the threat picture has sort of gone. I think the question becomes, if you see a resulting exaggerated crackdown on sort of broader communities and the sort of victimization and the social tensions that can cause, that's the sort of damage which can really be irreparable to societies.
And the closing of the borders to prevent people leaving or more people arriving, we just don't know how long that could be in place, or for what reason it might be used as this might be the thing that prompts France to reconsider how it polices its borders.
Well, I think when you take this on top of the current refugees crisis that we've seen on the continent, it would not surprise me if you start to see discussions at quite a senior European level about revisiting the Schengen free movement zone, or at least trying to revisit some aspects of it. We saw some of this discussion already this year when there was the attempted attack on the Thalys train going to France. We saw after that there was a discussion of, well, did we need to start policing trains on the continent more? Did we need to start setting up stronger borders, and would that have been prevented if this had been the case? It's very difficult to know, but I think that certainly this question of free movement around the continent is something which I think security forces across Europe are going to be looking at very seriously and wondering if it's something that can continue. It's worth remembering that just a couple of days ago, authorities across the continent disrupted a very large network of people who were associated with this group, Ansar al-Islam, a terrorist group that's sort of a Kurdish jihadi Salafi group up in northern Iraq, which had a sort of network of people across Europe. We saw a very good European, cross-border European police cooperation. But the other side to that was the reason you had to have this cross-border cooperation was because the threat picture was really going in that direction, with people really across multiple countries.
Let me just bring you up to date with a couple of new lines that have just come into us. We understand that the police assault that was underway at the Bataclan concert hall in Paris is now over. The police are being quoted here by the Press Association, saying that there were hostages being held. The reports earlier were that up to 100 people were being held hostage. We need to have that fully confirmed. But the reports are that French forces have killed at least 2 attackers during that assault on the Bataclan concert hall in the 11th arrondissement. Separately, the United Nations Security Council has condemned what they described the barbaric and cowardly terrorist attacks in Paris. The Security Council underlined the need to bring the perpetrators of these terrorist acts to justice. And one other line, the President of France, François Hollande, has cancelled his participation at the G20 meeting, which is taking place in Turkey this weekend. I do believe we've got some mobile phone footage of what was happening outside the Bataclan concert theatre, and I'll stop speaking in a minute because you can hear shots fired. We understood there were some explosions and there was gunfire. Let's listen in.
Moi, je peux que retransmettre. Là, j'ai des policiers.
There are a couple of explosions and then some sort of gunfire as well. We understand, according to a Reuters reporter at the scene of that siege that we were just looking at footage of, the assault was launched by elite police units at the concert hall where those assailants had been holding people hostage. I believe that we had elite units out in January, didn't we, on the streets of Paris?
Yes.
In the aftermath of the Charlie Hebdo shootings, during the couple of days when the gunmen were on the run. Raffaella Pattucci is just briefly here with us from the Royal United Services Institute. So they've brought in real specialists to deal with this.
Well, they would. I mean, when you're looking at this sort of an operation and people who are clearly using automatic weapons and explosives, you have to send in special forces. I would suspect that their desire was probably to close down the hostage situation as soon as possible. If you're dealing with people who are clearly intent to kill as many as they can, then you want to prevent them from doing that anymore. And so moving in strong would be necessary. You know, the Charlie Hebdo attack, I think, was clearly a big wake-up call for French authorities. And then it's worth remembering that soon after that, there was a plot that was disrupted across the border in Belgium, in Verviers, with some individuals who appeared to have automatic weapons, who appeared to have explosive devices and police uniforms. And the suspicion was that they were planning some sort of a large-scale attack in Brussels that could have potentially been shaped like this. They were prevented, and there was a sort of heavy police assault there that ended up in a big shootout in Verviers. But, you know, it was a very live and dynamic terrorist incident.
They have had quite a lot to cope with this year, haven't
Yes.
they, France and their various authorities. Stay with us, if you would, Raffaella, for the moment, because on the line now we're joined by Léo Sidran, a jazz musician who was performing at a restaurant close to where one of these attacks happened. Léo, thank you for joining us here on BBC News. Tell us where you were and which attack you were close to, please.
Well, you know, to be honest with you, I'm not sure exactly what I was close to and what I wasn't, because it has been so difficult to really receive any accurate information here, just as difficult here as it is, I think, anywhere. But I was performing at a jazz club called the Sunset, which is in the first arrondissement near Châtelet. And there was a kind of a murmur that went through the crowd that something was going on. And we continued to play for a while and then took a break. And on that break, we still hadn't decided whether or not it made sense to continue playing or not. And somebody showed me a cell phone notification that there had been a shooting really pretty close by. And it just seemed almost impossible to continue playing a concert under those conditions. And so we kind of carefully encouraged people to calmly go home. And I did the same thing. And I'm in an apartment nearby right now.
Do you know what's happening outside? Because we understand that there's pretty much a lockdown in the city, and the mayor of Paris has said, you know, don't go anywhere. So you might be best to stay where you are.
Well, I think that was the sense, and in fact, when the first news kind of hit, we were thinking maybe it did make sense to stay where we were. I would say within 20 minutes of that initial indication, the streets completely emptied out. I mean, this is generally a very crowded area. It's a Friday night, so it would be, you know, pretty populated right now, and there's nobody on the street. I mean, I'm looking out on the street and I see nothing.
Where are you getting your information from about what you should do and what's happening?
I'm essentially getting it from international news media. I'm getting it from the internet.
How visible are the army and the police out on the streets where you are?
I didn't see any army, but I've just heard kind of a nonstop buzz of sirens for the last hour. And actually, I would say maybe in the last 5 minutes, 5 to 10 minutes, it's just started to hush, and I hear nothing.
Your confusion over where you are in relation to the events that have been unfolding is not unique to you. I promise it's quite difficult to sort of get an overview. Before this evening, though, you obviously not French, but you may spend quite a bit of time in France. What's the atmosphere been like in the city before tonight?
I would say it's been lovely. I've been here for about 10 days, and it's been sunny and wonderful. And actually unusually pleasant for this time of year. I haven't had any sense of discomfort or sense of lack of security or for my safety in any way. It's been a very positive autumn.
Even though, obviously, there has been increased security throughout the year because of the events of January in Charlie Hebdo, it hasn't put you off visiting France, despite the grave issues that we've seen this year.
Yeah, no, it's true. I mean, I've actually, this is my 4th trip to France this year to perform. I come under very non-political circumstances. I come to perform, and so I don't necessarily perceive the cultural feeling through that filter. But you're right. Yeah, it has been a difficult year for France, and you feel it a little bit. Although from my perspective, it has also been a very positive year culturally for me. So it's an interesting question. You're right.
I assume it's from the United States that you're visiting.
Yes, I am.
So when you look to Europe and the issues that clearly face the continent regarding terrorism, as we're assuming that these are terrorist attacks in Paris tonight, given an American perspective, do you feel that there is a greater threat to Europe than there is to the US?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I don't think that I would be able to say that I feel more or less that there's a greater threat, although I will say that I'm feeling something tonight that is somewhat familiar to me from, 2001 in the United States, and that I haven't felt in Europe as an American until now. So in that sense, I feel maybe there's something related now that I hadn't felt before. I think we're going to have to look at this in the light of day in order to know whether or not there's a greater threat. But I suppose at this moment I would say, yes, I do feel that.
Leo Sidron, we appreciate you talking to us. Keep safe and listen out for safe advice. We were reporting a few moments ago that the police assault using those elite forces at the Bataclan concert theatre in the 11th arrondissement was now over, and there were reports that the concert goers who had been stuck inside, been held hostage, had started to leave the theatre. However, we understand via the Reuters news agency, quoting BFM TV in France, that about 100 people are thought to have died inside the Bataclan concert hall. We had earlier heard that 15 people had been shot, and then 100 people had been held hostage. It would appear that those figures were a lot higher. With me again in the studio is the French journalist Agnès Poirier, who spends a lot of time in France as well as London. That is a shocking figure, Agnès.
Not a surprising one. That's what we were expecting. If you recall the events of the last few hours, the special unit of the French Armed Forces actually decided to storm the theatre very quickly, meaning that they were fearing, in any case, a huge number of casualties, because we are we are confronted with killers who are ready to die. There were reports of grenades within the theatre, and you can imagine what a grenade does in a confined space. Knowing that the Bataclan can actually welcome 1,500 people, yes, 100 dead is what the French newspaper Le Parisien is also quoting just now.
According to the AFP news agency, 3 suspected jihadists is how they're being described. Certainly people who were armed were killed when those elite police stormed the venue. Another news agency has it as 2 armed attackers were killed. It's a very great risk, a calculation that the authorities have to make when they storm a building of this size, when they're not entirely sure of what's happening inside.
Well, I think they knew that the killers were ready to die. That case, what's the option? It's not a traditional hostage crisis. When you negotiate something, when you release, people throughout the day, and it can take hours, as you know. The fact that they decided to strike almost immediately meant that the situation was extremely grave.
And it's very difficult here to know how these different acts of violence across multiple locations, perhaps as many as 7, how they all fit together.
Yes. Well, we'll know that in due time. Obviously, it looks very coordinated now. Did it take, many different cells, or just one? Was it planned for a very long time, or just one triggered? There was a trigger effect. One led to another. We'll know that.
You were with me in the studio a little bit earlier, and while you've been outside, I assume you've been speaking to a lot of people in France. Who have you spoken to? What are they telling you?
Well, a sense of shock. Also, some measures that France hasn't known in decades, or in living memory. State of emergency on the whole territory, borders closed. Not knowing. I had a friend on a plane who had just landed in Paris, and the pilot said, "Well, we don't know whether you'll be able to get out." So the word is yes, planes can land in France and trains will be running, but schools are going to be closed tomorrow, and all school trips are also cancelled throughout France for the next few days.
Agnes, for the moment, thank you very much. Let's speak now to Freedom Jackson, who is in her apartment just 2 doors away from the Bataclan concert hall. Freedom, thank you very much for joining us. You must have had the most terrifying evening. Tell us what you've been going through.
Lots of crying. I was just making some dinner, and then I heard some girl outside screaming, and 2 guys that sounded like they were having a fight, but I just thought it was like the usual Friday night fight in Paris, like it happens. But it was really aggressive, so I closed my window because I didn't want to hear it. I went to my room, and I could still hear this girl screaming for help. And then the last thing I heard her say was screaming for a man called Talit, and then I heard a massive bang. And for me, I was like, oh, it won't be a gunshot because that doesn't really happen. But I was really scared because everyone started screaming and I could hear loads of people shouting, and it just sounded really aggressive outside. So I stayed in my room. I rang my friend because I'm 18 and I've only been living in Paris for 2 months by myself, so it's all a big change for me. And then I was on the phone to my friend, and he could hear the rounds of gunfire while I was sat on the phone to him, and he just said, "You can't leave your room at all, just stay there and don't leave." And just after that, we looked at the news and we saw that it was all happening next door. It quietened down for quite a while, and then probably an hour ago now, 45 minutes ago, there was loads of gunshots again, and loads of people screaming. And so I decided that I had to go and stay in my neighbour's flat because I was too scared to stay by myself.
Yes, I think everyone could understand why you would feel the need for company on tonight of all nights, and it's only after 2 months of living in Paris. What were you able to see outside the window, because you're not very far away from the Bataclan where this siege and the hostage taking was happening?
You can see the police surrounding the area. There's all the police that are in their protective outfits with the shields and the shields on their face. And they were circling the building, but I think they've killed the 2 terrorists now. So I think at the moment it's like preparing to evacuate the hostages inside the cafe.
Yes, that's certainly what we're hearing, but we have heard that there have been possibly 100 people who've died as a result of that siege, with the elite police forces storming the building, 2, possibly 3 attackers or gunmen having been killed in that. The advice that we're hearing from the mayor of Paris is that nobody should be going anywhere. I assume that you will be following that very closely.
Yeah, I don't. I'm quite happy on the 6th floor in the sky, not being anywhere near anyone. I don't want to go anywhere near what's going on down there. And I'm hoping that tomorrow I can go to Versailles to live with my aunt for the weekend, just because I don't want to be this close to it. But we'll see. Again, that's perfectly understandable. Freedom Jackson, thank you very much for talking to us, and keep safe. Stay with that neighbour. Let's just remind you of the latest that we're hearing. Police sources saying that 100 people are thought to have died inside the Bataclan concert hall. They'd gone there this evening, a busy Friday night, a packed venue to watch a heavy metal band from California. And we understand that attackers, certainly 2, maybe 3 or even more, stormed the building. Shots were fired. And then within the last few minutes, really, we've heard that those who survived that attack have been making their way out of that concert hall. Well, the French President François Hollande was on TV a little earlier tonight telling the nation that terrorist attacks were underway on what he described as an unprecedented scale. He also announced a state of emergency and the closure of the country's borders.
2 décisions seront prises.
2 decisions will be taken. A state of emergency will be decreed, which means that certain places will be shut off, traffic may be banned from certain places, and searches may be conducted across the whole Paris region. The state of emergency will be proclaimed across the whole territory. The second decision I have taken is to close the borders. We must make certain that nobody may enter to carry out any acts, whatever they may be, and make sure that the people who have, alas, committed these crimes are apprehended should they leave the territory.
That was the French President François Hollande speaking a little earlier to the French people on television. We're getting some unconfirmed reports, and I must stress that. They are unconfirmed reports from social media, that the camp known as the Jungle in Calais, which is the home to many migrants who are trying to make their way across the Channel, that camp is on fire. The suspicion is that this could be a revenge attack. I would urge you to listen to that with a huge amount of caution. We need to get that confirmed by BBC correspondents, but social media reports suggest that the Jungle camp in Calais, which is a meeting point for thousands of migrants trying to make their way from Africa and the Middle East, is on fire. The suggestion is, and it is only a suggestion, that it's a possible revenge attack. I was also just reading on social media, Reuters saying that the French Foreign Ministry has said that airports will remain open, that flights and trains will continue running, which is slightly confusing because we've also heard that the borders are closing for France, the land borders supposedly, but we'll need a full explanation of how flights and trains can keep running, potentially, obviously across borders, unless these are just internal flights and internal trains. We need to have that explained to us. Let's speak to our correspondent, Hugh Schofield, who joins us from Paris now. And a reminder, Hugh, that you were 100, 200 metres away from the Bataclan concert hall. We understand that the siege there is now over, but with a high number of casualties.
Well, I don't know anything about the casualties. And in fact, as I speak, we're waiting at a police line for, I think, the prosecutor of Paris to come and talk to us. And he will give us here the detail, no doubt, of what has happened. I know that there are reports circulating, which you're seeing more quickly than I am, of a high number of casualties. I just can't comment on that. But there certainly is a sense that this is over here, because the police seem more relaxed, and there is this imminent briefing. A policeman has just come around in plain clothes saying, be ready, because there's going to be a press conference coming up. I understand also that President Hollande and Manuel Valls, Prime Minister, are in the area touring some of the places which have witnessed the attacks. And it might be them I can see in the distance now, and I can't really make out, but there's a group of officials wandering around talking to police, and I'm hoping one of them will be the prosecutor, maybe higher up, maybe even Hollande will come over and talk to us. I just don't know, but one does sense that it's over, and now it's a question of working out what has happened, what the toll is, and then the big questions about what this all means.
Tell us what you're seeing now, because obviously the mayor of Paris some time ago advised people across the whole of the Paris region, a huge area of France, to stay indoors. But of course, people who are trapped, are trying to get out of the Bataclan concert theatre, they've got to get home somehow.
Well, yeah, I mean, in the bars all around here, you can see that there are people behind the shutters just waiting. I think in practice it's loosening up. People are coming out and moving on now. I mean, in the immediate area around Bataclan, it's still very much locked down. But we're quite a way back now. They've pushed it back, and we must be 200 or 300 meters away from the scene of the action. And I think that word from Prefecture to people in the Paris region, stay at home, was very much in the heat of the moment when no one knew quite what was happening. I suspect as time goes by, and maybe already, they will feel that something terrible has happened, but it's happened, and that there aren't others on the loose, and then this dreadful sense of sort of siege will ease off. I can't really judge where we are in that process, though, right now, whether they think they've sort of tagged all the terrorists and therefore what's done has been completed, or whether they think there are more people on the loose. I just don't know.
Hugh, for the moment, thank you very much. Well, Lucy Williamson is another one of our correspondents in Paris tonight. Lucy, you were also, last time we spoke to you, not very far away from the Bataclan concert hall. What are you hearing?
Well, the Bataclan concert hall is behind us along this road here, and we do know the assault is finished now. We're getting reports that some attackers, at least, have been killed in that assault, but we're also getting early reports from the French news agency here that maybe 100 hostages have been killed in the attack here. So we're still waiting confirmation on that, but if true, that's going to be a very, very bitter pill for France to swallow, and a very difficult thing for the President Francois Hollande, who we believe is touring this area at the moment or shortly. A very difficult thing for him to overcome and to try and instill a sense of security going forward.
Yes, of course, a huge risk even when elite forces are sent in to try to end a siege like this. I mean, it must be a hugely difficult call for the authorities to know what to do.
Sieges like this are notoriously difficult, trying to safeguard hostages' lives while dealing with the threat. I know there is a protocol for this, but obviously we don't know exactly what happened here tonight, at what stage the casualties happened, or who was responsible. So I think, as with everything that's happened here tonight, it's far too early perhaps to really get a forensic sense of how things unfolded. At the moment, the authorities here are still at the stage of counting the dead, trying to lock down the rest of the capital, and really make sure they've got everyone they can in the network, they presume, that carried out these attacks.
Lucy, let me just pause for a second, because there is a suggestion that it was being reported on social media that there were some pictures of a fire at the camp known as the Jungle in Calais. It does appear that these were old pictures that came from some time ago. I did warn that we needed to treat those reports with utmost care because we needed to have it confirmed. It does appear that those pictures were old and not pertinent to tonight or anything that's been happening in Paris. So we'll set those to one side. A reminder, though, that the police are appealing on social media for tonight's anyone with any information about any of the attacks in those 7 locations that we know of so far, to contact them. Clearly, there are multiple eyewitnesses to what's happened, because there has been seems to have been a multifaceted and a coordinated attack. Lucy Williamson is still with us live from Paris. And now, Lucy, the country is almost in lockdown, state of emergency, and the borders are supposed to be closed. What's that going to mean for people in France?
Well, I think it was President Hollande's initial reaction to a situation that very few people understood tonight. He, as you said that France was facing a series of terrorist attacks that were unprecedented here. And as you said, he called for a state of emergency, announced a state of emergency, also an assault on the building behind me. And yes, he has said that the borders of the country will be closed to prevent the attackers fleeing.
And he also called for military reinforcements. I mean, since the Charlie Hebdo events of January, there was a greater security presence on the streets. How likely is it that that's going to be ratcheted up now, then?
I think if the number of dead that we are hearing here is confirmed, this is really a game changer for France, and it's really something that's going to call for really quite radical, perhaps, thinking on how France can protect itself. After the Charlie Hebdo attacks, security was ramped up all across vulnerable sites. But the trouble with attacks like this is they often happen on soft targets, a restaurant, a concert hall, places that are very difficult to protect nationwide. And so I think that's going to be the challenge that faces the government in the days to come.
If we remember, after Charlie Hebdo, there were a couple of days, weren't there, where the gunmen in those shootings were on the run. We appear to have multiple attackers who the police need to trace. The city is going to be a difficult place to be for the next few days.
That's right. I think there are several attackers that police are trying to find at the moment, and there's obviously a great deal of fear in Paris as their whereabouts remain unknown. Of course, it raises very painful memories of the attacks 10 months ago when Charlie Hebdo was attacked, the siege at the Jewish supermarket, and the tense days that unfolded as police tried to chase and find everyone involved in those attacks. And I think, the next few days are going to be very worrying ones here for people in Paris and further afield.
Lucy, I'm just conscious that there's a great deal of noise behind you. Just want to make sure that you're okay, you're safe. You maybe turn around and tell us what you can see, because there seem to be people moving.
I'm not exactly sure what's going on behind me, but there are a great deal of onlookers who have gathered here, and I think, yes, it may be a skirmish has broken out amongst the onlookers, or perhaps with the police, but there are a great deal of security forces here and some onlookers who are here on the street late at night here on Friday night.
Lucy, we'll let you go and investigate what's happening around you. For the moment, thank you very much. Lucy Williamson, near the Bataclan concert theatre, where that assault by police led to a number of people who have been held hostage being able to leave the building. We do understand there are dozens of casualties. We need to have the figure confirmed. A man called Ben Grant is also in Paris at the moment. He was at the Belle Équipe restaurant in the city when it was attacked.
There was a shooting. I think we were told it was some people in cars. They opened fire on the bar. It's a lot of people. We're being led out of the building right now by police. So apologies if I have to cut off early. There's a lot of dead people. It's pretty horrific, to be honest. I was at the back of the bar, so I couldn't see anything. I just heard the gunshots. People dropped to the ground. We managed to put a table over our head to protect us, and just hold tight there until it finished. And we were sort of held up in the bar because the pile of bodies in front was too much for my wife to walk over. So we waited inside until just now we got let out. So it looked like at least maybe 7 dead people still outside. The amount of people that were injured was huge. I mean, it was one of those Parisian bars with loads of people hanging outside having drinks, what they normally do in Paris. So it was really full bar at the time. We were just lucky to be all the way at the back, I think.
Who was in one of the restaurants that came under attack earlier this evening. Well, the President of the United States, Barack Obama, has been speaking about the Paris attacks as well.
Those who think that they can terrorize the people of France or the values that they stand for are wrong. The American people draw strength from the French people's commitment to life, liberty, pursuit of happiness. We are reminded in this time of tragedy that the bonds of liberté and égalité and fraternité are not only values that the French people care so deeply about, but they are values that we share. And those values are going to endure far beyond any act of terrorism or the hateful vision of those who perpetrated the crimes this evening.
President Obama extending his condolences and words of support to the French people. Our World Affairs correspondent Richard Galpin is here. Richard, let's just pause for a second and look back on what we understand to have happened. It seems to be a multifaceted attack by a number of people in several different locations in Paris tonight.
Yeah, absolutely. And people are saying this is the worst attack Paris has suffered for decades, perhaps even going back as far as the Second World War. What we know for sure now is that more than 100 people have been killed in just the one single location, the Bataclan concert hall, which apparently had seats for 400 to 500 people, and it was packed at this concert which is going on tonight. There have also been attacks outside the Stade de France, where the President, François Hollande, was attending a football match between France and Germany. Then we know for sure there have been attacks at a restaurant and a bar, possibly other locations as well. I mean, according to some reports, there have been attacks at least 7 different locations. And I think, standing back from it, what's pretty clear is that this was a very well-coordinated, pre-planned attack. And also some eyewitnesses have been saying that they saw the gunman opening fire. The magazines then ran out. They fitted more magazines onto their weapons, fired again at several occasions. So these are people who absolutely knew what they were doing. And
came well equipped for the violence they were intent on perpetrating. Yeah. You mentioned the death toll. A Paris City Hall official being quoted by Reuters is saying that about 100 people were killed at the Bataclan concert hall, and the belief is that about 40 other people died in the other locations where we've seen these attacks tonight. There have also been reports that 2, possibly 3 attackers were killed by this elite police units that went in to try to bring an end to this siege. This leaves France with an enormous concern over what do they do now in the next few days. We saw the reaction in terms of increased security in the sort of days and weeks post Charlie Hebdo earlier in the year. Yeah, but more immediately, the fact is that there are still, we don't know how many, but there are several gunmen still on the loose. There's, as you say, maybe 2 or 3 have been killed at the Bataclan, but the other gunmen, we assume that they're still around in Paris, and the police will be doing everything they can to try and track them down. But absolutely, the question of security in Paris now for the next few days is going to be absolutely huge. And I think, one thing we also have to remember is that after the Charlie Hebdo attacks in Paris back in January, which are absolutely horrific attacks at the time, President Hollande promised that they would improve security to kind of prevent these kind of attacks happening again. And lo and behold, here we are, 9-10 months later, and we've had an even more serious attack. Earlier reports saying as well that there have been 2 suicides and a bombing at the Stade de France. We obviously need to have all of these early reports confirmed. Richard, for the moment, thank you very much. Charlie Pitt is a freelance cameraman in Paris, and he was just 30 metres from a bar where people were shot just after 9 p.m. local time.
I'm in the 11th, about 75 metres from the Belle Equipe cafe that was hit about 10 past 9. I'd just been to the supermarket, just walked past the front of the cafe. It's a popular, typical French cafe. People were sitting outside, and I'd literally got about 30 metres when I thought it was a firecracker to start off with, and then it went on, it got louder, and it went on for about a minute. Everybody sort of dived for cover thinking it was gunfire, and it went on for about a minute. Then there was a pause for about 15 seconds, and then it all started up again. We all sort of left, and then it sort of calmed down a bit. So I walked back to the front of the cafe, and there was a whole pile of bodies, probably about 7 on the left-hand side, and about 4 that had been sitting at the tables outside on the right-hand side, and a lot of injured. I saw a woman who'd obviously been shot in the leg, and then the police turned up, and now we're sort of shoved about 75 metres away. A lot of fire brigade, a lot of police, a lot of army patrolling the streets, keeping everybody away.
Charlie, we're trying to get a sense of the geography of this, because obviously the different districts, the arrondissement in Paris, they sort of circle out, don't they, like a spiral from the very centre. We were just talking to a journalist who was in the 10th arrondissement, not far from you, where an attack happened on an Asian Cambodian restaurant. You're at this bar in the 11th arrondissement, but there's also, we understand, a hostage situation and potentially some casualties unfolding at the Bataclan concert theatre, which is also in your district.
Yeah, it might well be. The police sort of, told us all to get out of the streets inside, then told us to get outside onto the streets again. It all went quiet for a while, and then a whole host of fire brigade trucks and more police turned up. Sorry, I'm just being moved on by the army. Turned up, and there's a lot of activity down here. I don't know whether they think there's somebody still around, but there's a lot of activity down here.
How quickly were the emergency services on the scene?
The police turned up. Sorry, I'm just getting asked to move on. The police turned up very quickly. I was actually helping a woman who wasn't too badly injured, had a lot of blood on her. Hang on, we're getting moved off again. I don't know what's happening, but we're getting moved away. So,
do you know where they are trying to move you to, Charlie? Because obviously we're hearing that the French police have asked the public to in the Paris region generally to stay indoors.
Yeah, we're just being told to go inside, so I'm just going inside the apartment block. So, yeah, we've been moved inside now. The army have moved us inside, so I can't see what's going on, but something is obviously going on. They're going up the street, clearing everybody off the street.
Charlie Pitt, a freelance cameraman in Paris, with his view of what was happening close to one of the sites that came under attack tonight. Just a word from our Europe editor, Cathy Adler. She's just tweeted that France says it's mobilising 1,500 extra troops as a result of these attacks that we've been reporting on this evening. Nabila Ramdani is a French-Algerian journalist. She specialises in French politics and in the Middle East. Since you were last in here with me, Nabila, you've been on the phone talking to people, a lot of reporters and officials in France. What are they telling you?
Yes, indeed, and we still have an awful lot to learn about what is effectively an unfolding story, and it is very sinister and indeed macabre. I've spoken to government sources and indeed to the City Hall in Paris, who have confirmed that 140 people have been killed in Paris tonight, including children, and especially in the theatre where hostages were held. 100, it seems, have been executed one by one before a grenade exploded in the theatre. Police forces then went in, and apparently the French president is going to be on the scene as well shortly. The scenes in Paris tonight are ones of, a city and indeed a country under siege. And that's also reflected in the measures that have been taken by the government and especially by closing off the borders effectively. There are curfews, there's a curfew implemented, and indeed a state of emergency, which didn't happen in the country since 2005 when there were riots.
And even then, some commentators have been saying even then it wasn't a countrywide state of emergency. So this takes it even further than 10 years ago.
Well, absolutely. At the time, it was definitely targeted at stopping young, angry people from going on rampage and destroying public property as they vented their anger against the government. But this is, we're talking about an absolutely, terrorist attack on a massive scale. To give you an element of comparison, the last time there was a terrorist attack that was, perceived as massive in France was in 1961, when 26 people were killed on the train by the OAS, which was an organisation fighting the government for Algeria to remain under French control. But what happened tonight, we're well off the measure of the 1961 attacks.
I'm just reading from Reuters, Nabila, that Belgium is now imposing new checks on its border with France, particularly looking at rail and air arrivals after these attacks. We know that the borders are closing, but at the same time we were hearing that France was still going to allow trains to run and flights to take off and land. I mean, whether they are just journeys that people will undertake within the country has not been made clear, but a massive impact on people if the borders are closed.
Well, yes, indeed, and I think it does reflect the atmosphere of confusion in France at the moment. Of course, it's very unclear as well what the government is trying to say by closing its borders. Is it trying to prevent people from leaving the country, but possibly the people behind the attacks? Is it trying to prevent people from getting in the country to perpetrate further attacks? But what is certain tonight is that the movement of people will be monitored, and the French president has now to appear as to show some leadership and to try to reassure people, which is a very challenging task for him to do, and that involves, of course, means of transports which are extremely hard to monitor.
A very difficult balance, isn't it, for decision makers to strike? They need to keep people safe. They need to have visible signs, 1,500 extra troops on the streets, and supposedly not just in Paris but in France. But you don't want normal life to grind to a halt.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, you have to give the impression that people can carry on with their lives as normal as possible. But under these circumstances, it's very clear that the French government will have questions to answer as far as, what are seen as massive security failures. It's impossible to convince people that they can, start leading a normal life again, especially as soon, so shortly after what were major terrorist attacks back in January against the Charlie Hebdo offices and indeed a kosher supermarket in central Paris.
The other issue, I suppose, as well, is if it turns out that any of these attackers, and we don't know how many we're dealing with in these multiple sites, if any of them were on a watch list, if any of them had been known, because of course it's not inconceivable, is it, for these people to be acting alone, a small group of people who maybe in their minds allied to another group somewhere else, but not necessarily known to the authorities.
Well, you're quite right to raise this very important point, because as what happened with the Charlie Hebdo attacks, the terrorists involved were in fact known to the authorities. And as often, people who do perpetrate this kind of attacks are known to the authorities. But it has to be said that in France, they are often on a watch list, but they often let off and they slip off. The authorities give up on keeping an eye on them, as it were. And that will absolutely be held against President Hollande. who has tried to firm up security measures after the Charlie Hebdo attack, dare I say, by trying to step up security measures through monitoring the internet, monitoring the expression of extremism online, but also by passing surveillance law, much stricter surveillance laws, in spite of oppositions from human rights organizations, for example. And clearly, this hasn't been enough in terms of intelligence.
A great deal of statements and condolences coming in from leaders around the world, and now here's Angela Merkel's statement, the German Chancellor, of course. I am deeply shaken by the news and pictures that are reaching us from Paris, she said. We also heard earlier from President Obama and David Cameron expressing similar sentiments. Angela Merkel goes on to say, my thoughts in these hours are with the victims of what appears to be a terrorist attack. And just another note, I've just spotted via AFP that the Turkish president, who was voted back into office with a majority only last weekend, Recep Tayyip Erdogan, offered his condolences as well following these attacks tonight, calling for a consensus of the international community against terrorism. He went on to say, as a country that knows very well the manner and consequences of terrorism, we understand perfectly the suffering that France is experiencing now. How well does France cooperate with other countries when it comes to sharing intelligence? Because that too will no doubt come under the spotlight.
Yes, indeed, and especially, after tonight, many countries around the world, and especially Western countries, would be extremely worried about similar attacks happening on their soil as well, especially so as many of them are involved, or indeed willing to be involved more, as it were, in war zones like Syria or indeed Iraq. In fact, there have been reports about shouts being heard in central Paris for Syria, which might suggest that these attacks might have happened as if you like, as an opposition to France's involvement in Syria. It has started to bomb ISIS targets very recently. So all the likelihood is that it might be linked to ISIS-affiliated groups.
As you say, it's early days and we've got to wait to get identification of these attackers, but certainly what you say is being reflected on social media, that certain websites that are allied to militants are celebrating what they've seen happen in Paris tonight. Nabila Ramdani, we appreciate you giving us your perspective. Thank you very much for joining us this evening. Well, Delano de Souza is a France 24 journalist and was at a bar nearby one of the locations where the shootings took place.
Well, I'm in a bar in the 10th arrondissement of Paris, which is close to where the shooting happened at the Cambodian restaurant. So that's about a 15-minute walk away from where I am. And I entered the bar where I am at around 10 p.m. local time. And immediately as I entered, friends who I was with heard of the shooting that happened in the 10th arrondissement. So it was pretty sudden the minute I walked into this place. Immediately, maybe about half an hour after, we realized that it was not just one isolated incident, that there were explosions at the Stade de France, and gunman was on the loose, driving around in a black vehicle, was what we were told from the French police through social media. And then we tried to leave the bar, and then the bar implemented a shutdown. So no one's been allowed to leave where we are. And obviously a lot of people in the bar tonight, Friday night. We have around a little over 100 people here. There's a band performing, and people are worried, and they want to go outside and make calls and tell people that they're okay and safe, but they're not allowed to do that.
Delano, first of all, just let's backtrack a little bit. How many attackers do the police believe were involved in this attack on the Petit Cambodge restaurant in the 10th arrondissement where you are?
Well, if you look if you look at the pictures posted on social media, it looks like the attacks happened from outside. So I don't want to speculate right now because it's too early to say if this was a drive-by shooting, because there's also reports of gunmen or possibly more than one gunman driving around in a black vehicle shooting at people. So I'm not sure right now we don't know if anything is linked or if anything's linked to what's happening in the Stade de France or what's happening in the 10th arrondissement or the 11th arrondissement, because now, before I got on this call with you, I found out that it had actually spread to the 1st arrondissement, the area of Les Halles in Paris.
Yes, we're also hearing that from our Europe editor. Katya Adler has posted something on Twitter suggesting that some kind of attack has happened at Les Halles, which is much closer to the centre of Paris.
If Paris is a circle basically. So the arrondissement, the 1st arrondissement, the 10th arrondissement, the 11th are very, very close to each other, and these are all areas that are very crowded on a weekend night. Les Halles is the main train hub, if you will, of Paris, because you have a lot of long distance trains, the RERs as they're called, which come to Châtelet, which is where Les Halles is. So that's the main transport hub. So it's a very crowded part of Paris late at night.
Delano de Souza, journalist from France 24, giving us his eyewitness account of one of the attacks that has happened in Paris tonight. More than 100 people are said to have died in a mass hostage-taking at the Bataclan concert hall in northeast Paris tonight. It's feared that at least 40 more people have died in a series of bombings and shootings which have happened at several locations. World leaders have responded with shock and pledges of solidarity for France, although there's little action that any of them could take immediately. Stay with us for continued coverage of the Paris attacks.
Welcome to BBC News with me, Alice Baxter. Our top stories. Around 140 people have been killed in a series of gun and bomb attacks in Paris. In one attack at a rock concert, police say around 100 people died. 2 suicide bombings took place outside the National Stadium, where President Hollande was watching the French football team play Germany. And President Hollande has declared a state of emergency and closed the country's borders. Hello there. Now, it's been a night of terror, violence and confusion in Paris as a series of attacks have taken place right across the French capital. Dozens of people have died and many more were injured. Police have just stormed a concert hall where hostages were being held. Many of them, possibly more than 100, have been killed, when at least 2 of the attackers were shot dead. Earlier, at least 10 people were killed by a gunman at a nearby restaurant. Several explosions went off at the National Sports Stadium during a friendly match against Germany. Well, President Hollande, who was at that match, has declared a state of emergency and sealed the country's borders. Well, our correspondent, Hugh Schofield, is in Paris for us and live on the line for us. And Hugh, you've been near the Bataclan concert hall for much of the evening. Latest reports that we're getting are that the siege, which has been going on there for a few hours, is now over, but we are getting reports of at least 100, we think, were killed as a result of that siege. What are you hearing?
Well, I don't know if the idea that they were killed as the result of the siege is necessarily the case. I mean, it's unclear when that toll occurred, if it is that big and that ghastly. I mean, it seems to me more likely that it was caused when the gunmen went in, and we have had some absolutely terrifying eyewitness reports on French media about 2 gunmen or 3 gunmen, and it's not quite clear how many, just opening fire into the crowd and having the time to reload once and again and shooting for minutes. And it seems to me that the very, very high death toll, which seems to be firming up at the Bataclan rock concert was caused mainly in those early minutes when the gunmen went in and simply on a very crowded, packed audience opened fire, causing absolute pandemonium, as you can imagine. Subsequently, there was some kind of standoff which lasted an hour or so, and then, as you say, police and special forces moved in. I would say about an hour ago now. I mean, there were bangs about an hour ago, and it seems to be over. Certainly, the atmosphere has changed here. The police are evidently much more relaxed. It is over, and we're waiting, in fact, for a briefing from the Paris prosecutor or someone in an official capacity to tell us an official toll and what exactly happened. But I mean, the French media, though, are reporting and unanimously a very high death toll of 70 or 80 people, if not more, in the Bataclan. And as I say, I think those casualties will have been caused at the beginning, where the gunmen burst in, rather than at the end when there was the assault by police.
Yeah, as you say, Hugh, we'll of course have to wait for any sort of death toll to be confirmed. President Hollande actually speaking outside the Bataclan concert hall as we are speaking. Of course, any number will be very difficult for him to digest. And of course, it must have been a very difficult decision for the government to send in those elite forces in order to try to end this siege, a risky strategy.
Well, I mean, they'll have known stuff that we don't know about the situation inside. It's not clear at all how many hostages there were. I mean, it may be that many of the people got out and others were left inside. We just don't know the situation. But I mean, going by what happened last January and the siege of the Jewish supermarket, I mean, they weigh these things up, of course, but then they are prepared to go in and act, and that's what they've done. And we'll just have to see, what the end result of the actual assault was. I mean, we think there are 2 dead gunmen. We just don't know whether in the assault the gunmen were able to open fire on other hostages. It's impossible to say, but of course it would have been an absolutely awful decision to have to take. But, I think it's one that governments here have shown, and, well, across the world have shown they are prepared to take against against terrorists who act in this way. We're just being asked to move on by police.
Yeah, of course, you were alluding there to the Charlie Hebdo attack just 10 months ago in the same city and very close to this Bataclan concert hall. Hugh, many thanks for keeping us updated. Do stay on the line for us. I know we're going to be coming back to you as developments continue to unfold. Hugh Schofield there for us near this Bataclan concert hall, where we understand the siege has now ended, and President Hollande was just speaking to the press as I was on the line to Hugh. Well, let's just give you a recap now for our viewers who've just joined us as to what's happened in the last few hours in Paris. Simon Jones has this report now on a very fast-moving story.
Terror returns to Paris, a series of attacks leading France to declare a state of emergency. Gunfire on the streets. Explosions heard at the Stade de France stadium where the national team was playing.
Mes chers compatriotes, au moment où je m'exprime,
my dear countrymen, as I speak, terrorist attacks on an unprecedented scale are taking place in the Paris region. There are several dozen dead, lots more wounded. It's horrific. We have, on my orders, mobilized all the forces we can muster in order to neutralize the terrorist threat and to secure all the affected areas.
100 are feared dead inside a concert hall. One official said attackers had thrown explosives at their hostages. The British Prime Minister David Cameron said he was shocked by events in Paris, saying Britain would do whatever it could to help. Views shared by President Obama.
Paris itself represents the timeless values of human progress. Those who think that they can terrorize the people of France or the values that they stand for are wrong.
One eyewitness said he was in a bar with his wife when gunshots were fired.
see anything. I just heard the gunshots. People dropped to the ground. We managed to put a table over our head to protect us. And we were sort of held up in the bar because the pile of bodies in front was too much for my wife to walk over.
Who is behind these attacks remains unclear. Simon Jones, BBC News.
Well, the worst bloodshed was at a rock concert in the northeast of the city where gunmen were shooting hostages. Police stormed the venue, killing at least 2 assailants. Our Paris correspondent Lucy Williamson reports now from outside the Bataclan Theatre.
Well, the siege has ended here at the Bataclan concert hall behind me, and the reports we're getting are that at least some of the attackers tonight have been killed in that assault, but also initial reports that maybe as many as 100 of the hostages could have died. If that's the case, the task facing the government over the coming days in terms of securing the capital and making its people feel secure is going to be a very tough one. Tonight was a night that President Hollande described when France faced terrorist attacks unprecedented in scale. He's already called for a state of emergency and has closed France's borders to try and prevent the attackers escaping. But with so many multiple attacks across Paris tonight, the police, the security services are going to have their work cut out, not just to secure the capital, but also to work out the motives and the perpetrators behind them. Lucy Williamson, BBC News, Paris.
Lucy, they're outside the Bataclan Theatre. Well, I'm now joined via Skype from Paris by Elia Haddad, and he was at the France versus Germany friendly match when the bombs exploded in the stadium. Another scene of violence tonight. Elia, many thanks for joining me here on the line. So you were at the Stade de France in the Saint-Denis area in the north of Paris. Thanks for joining us. So tell us what you saw.
For covering. So I was watching the match, and we were in the stadium with my friends. We were watching the match, and during the second half, we heard beginning of the second half, we heard the detonation. So I thought it was thunder. My roommate told me that it's not. It sounded like something else, but we thought it was thunder. Then maybe 5 or 10 minutes after, we heard another double detonation. Was what, sir? It was at the end of the first half. So 10 minutes after, we heard the second detonation, followed by a third. And then we started thinking that there could be something happening. And at that point, we looked inside the stadium, and people around us started looking at their cell phones. And maybe 5 minutes after, people started standing up. There was no sense of emergency, but people started standing up and started leaving, and the more time passed in the second half, the more people started leaving in a much more hurry. So we could feel the tension in the stadium because people weren't cheering anymore. So you could sense there was something very wrong that happened, and at that point. We started seeing our cell phones. We started catching network, and we started seeing on our cell phones what happened, and then people started really pouring out of the stadium, and we felt the tension. We went out there, and we tried to leave. There was a lot of people. It coincided with the end of the match.
It must have been very confusing. I mean, we now know that what you heard was 3 explosions when the football game carried on. But in a city in the centre of town, hearing 3 bangs, it must have been confusing as to what you were all actually hearing. How did you feel when you all started to go onto your mobile phones and reports started to filter through as to what was happening elsewhere in the city? And of course, you must also have been aware that President Hollande left the football game earlier on at some point.
True. Of course, we were coming. The idea of coming there was to have fun and have a good time, but it was not a good time. It's true that when we started looking at our cell phones, we felt unsafe, very unsafe. When we started seeing the information, and when we learned through the media, through our cell phones, that President Hollande had left the stadium, we felt that something's wrong. We read that he was exfiltered from the stadium. So this word has all its meaning. So we felt that there was something wrong, something happening. But we felt that staying inside the stadium could be safer than going out, because we heard of the explosions and we knew that it was very, very, very close to the stadium. So we felt that
you left the stadium, Elia, once you got onto the streets immediately outside in the Saint-Denis area.
There was a lot of confusion, to be honest. So there was a lot of people. We felt that everyone was aware of what was happening. And just a second, my roommate wants to add something.
Outside there was not a lot of police. There were no paramilitary guiding people, so there was just confusion, and there was many stampedes.
Many what?
Many stampedes because of rumors about shootings in the area.
Okay, yes. So there were people trying to guide us. There were people trying to guide the people out, but there was a lot of confusion. What you say, stampedes? So there were many stampedes, actually.
Elliot, were you being given any official information from anyone, or was it all via telephones, via social media?
It was almost all via social media. When we were in the stadium at the end of the match, they announced in the microphone that because there was an incident, so they didn't precise more than that. They precised that there was an incident outside, and they have required us to use certain doors to exit. So of course, then we could feel the tension going out. And when we went out, to answer your previous question, when we went out, there was confusion, and at some point there were people running because they thought that gunmen were still there, or that there was another attack. So there were people running, maybe for a reason, maybe not. So there was some confusion. There was a lot of confusion.
And Elia, of course, now since these events you've just been talking about, since watching the football game, President Hollande has declared a state of emergency. He's closed the borders, and the mayor of France has advised residents to stay